Go ahead and
What do you got?
She's down in Kansas City.
good to go. All right.
We are good to go.
We still have an echo. I don't know if there's any way to kill the echo.
You just turn off his speaker.
Is green. We
Test
have
1, 2, 3.
Until that.
You can slide over. It's a thing over here. Just slide over. Mhm. Oh, is this my junk? Yeah, sorry. I thought I was going to sit here anyway.
It's house on.
That was- All right. Still have the echo. Just give us 30 seconds to try to sort this out.
Should be, but I gotta make sure that the mics will come through.
You. This is hidden.
Yours is off now, David.
Wait, David, you get two microphones.
Yeah, Drew, we're getting a little echo through the actual.
It's not echoing on this side.
1 second, BC's.
Yeah, it's still echoing here. And it was echoing actually, Drew, when you said that, interestingly.
Headphone. Yes. You can go grab them. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Ross, is it the public laptop?
Yeah.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Test 1, 2, 3.
We may need to tell it to come out of this.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Did you turn off the audio for the conference room laptop?
So, yeah, just.
I don't want to mess anything up.
Slightly better. Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit. Little reverb. Mhm.
Do one last thing.
That would make meetings so much more fun. Ah, it's still there. It's annoying, but. Do we have any last minute adjustments or should we just deal with it and move on?
2 seconds.
Okay.
Does that make a difference?
Test 1, 2, 3.
I think we just may need to go for it and then. Yeah, I mean, it's turned down all the way. But that's gonna be the whole room turned down. Yeah, that might make it.
Let's see. That's still there, but we're just going to deal with it and move forward. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of SCTA and RCPA for today. And we are going to start with a roll call, and we do also have a teleconference disclosure today from Director Kelly. And I believe that Drew will lead us in that process.
Yes, good afternoon, SCTA, RCPA Board of Directors. I apologize for not being there. I am recovering from COVID, so it's still around. So with that, I will do roll, and then I will read the AB 2449 teleconference for Director Kelly. So with that, we will start with Director Janice Cater Thompson.
Here. Here.
Director Chris Corsi.
Here.
You're here. Director Susan Harvey.
Here.
Director Gerard Giudice.
Present.
Director Nisa Hinton.
Here.
Director Ariel Kelly.
Participating via teleconference.
Sandra Lowe had informed me that she would not be present today. Director Jeff Okrepke.
Here.
Director David Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rosa Reynosa. Why don't we see? Vice Chair Melanie Bagby.
Present.
And then Chair Linda Hopkins.
Present.
Oops. Lots of presents. Presents for everyone. All right, and so with that, we have a quorum. And then I will read into the record. I'm on share. Oop. All right, so Director Kelly had informed me this morning that she would be attending remotely pursuant to AB 2449, which allows up to 2 virtual attendances per calendar year for Just Cause. The circumstances of today's Just Cause teleconference participation is family illness. Director Kelly, do you have anyone else over the age of 18 present in your remote location with you?
No.
And so with because this is Just Cause, no vote is needed, but you are limited to 2 per calendar year. And so with that, we will bring Director Kelly in as a quorum board member for today, and then the rest of the votes will be done via roll call.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Drew. With that, we will go ahead and move to public comments on items not on the regular agenda. There were no pre-submitted comments received. Is there anyone in person who wishes to comment on items not on the agenda? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Steve Bertelbaugh with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. I'd like to talk for just a minute about the request that's being made by all the regions, apparently, to pause SB 375, which is the Sustainable Communities strategy for reducing vehicle miles traveled and for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We've done a lot of work on this here in this county, Petaluma, Santa Rosa, Windsor, before there was ever a 375. In reducing the need for people to rely entirely on their automobiles. It's been a difficult effort. I think other places ought to be able to copy what's been done here. And I think to the extent that we can, we should oppose the idea of any kind of a pause. The process for planning takes a long time. 5 or 6 years is probably average. And if you throw a pause in the middle of all of this, while we figure out how we're going to make the reductions that are necessary, we're not going to meet our 2030 deadline. That deadline is difficult already. So I hope, to the extent that you can reach your friends in the other cities and so forth, let's neutralize the idea of a pause. It's taking us long enough as it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Anyone else in person who wishes to comment on matters not listed on the agenda? Seeing none, Drew, would you be able to just confirm that we have not received any additional pre-submitted comments?
Yeah, certainly. I did not receive any pre-submitted public comments for today's meeting.
Wonderful.
Confirming, yeah.
Great. And are there any members of the public online who wish to comment?
Yes, we do have one individual online wishing to comment, and that is Mike Petchner. Mike, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. My name is Mike Peckner. I've been involved in North Bay Transit for many, many years. I did 2 terms on the MTC Advisory Council. I was also the first citizen member of GEBROC, which was the Greater Bay Area Rail Commission that evolved into the Capital Corridor. I've also been a ambassador at SMART for 4 years and also worked for the Northwestern Pacific Railroad before SMART took over. I think I'm talking to the right group of folks. This concerns, of course, greenhouse gases, and it also includes the fact that traffic on 101 since the closure of the legacy Northwestern Pacific Railroad, not the SMART portion of it, has increased greatly, not only the traffic on 101, but the greenhouse gases. And I, along with Alan Hemphill, who used to be the chairman of the North Coast Rail Authority, is advocating that at some point your group gets behind the restoration of freight service from Willits to Cloverdale. SMART will, of course, eventually get to Cloverdale, but we want to see the traffic that is now coming down in truck traffic and other portions of that traffic to be routed over to the Northwestern Pacific. And the greenhouse gases definitely have gone up in the last 10 years since the railroad was closed. And I think the railroad is the most economical way of getting greenhouse gases reduced in Sonoma County. Additionally, of course, we have the problem of the Great Redwood Trail. That has not come in to fruition yet in terms of their filings with the Surface Transportation Board, but at some point they're going to want to abandon a very important and significant right-of-way to put a trail on that is between Willits and Cloverdale. And I'm hoping at some point when it gets down to that we have your backing that this is a bad move, and the only way to reduce greenhouse gases and reduce the carbon footprint along the 101 corridor is to resume rail traffic on 101. The reason why I say this, a lot of traffic comes down is no longer have the railroad available to them, and the trucking traffic, as you well know, has increased greatly on 101. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mike. Chair Hopkins, I don't see any other members online wishing to speak on items not on the regular agenda.
Thank you so much. Bringing that back to the board, we can't comment on items that are not on the agenda, but I do want to note, Steve, you were talking about something that is sort of a legislative action, and that in December, we will have a legislative update and preview for the upcoming year. So we'll have an opportunity to discuss that later. I believe it was December, or was that November? November. Okay, November, coming sooner. All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. So any questions or comments on the consent calendar? Does anyone wish to have something pulled? Director Harvey?
Nothing pulled, but I just wanted to make a quick comment on item 4.6. This is an extremely important for the city of Cotati. It actually will close a gap that will help students be able to get to our elementary school. So this is super important for Cotati. Thank you.
That's great. And congratulations on the work to get it here. With that, I will ask if any members of the public in person wish to comment on this item. These items, suite of items, consent calendar, which is 4.1 through 4.8. Seeing none, is there anyone online who wishes to comment on this item, or Drew, did we receive anything in advance?
I did not receive any pre-submitted public comment on the consent calendar, and I currently do not see any members of the public wishing to speak.
All right, with that, I would bring it back to my colleagues to entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. And Drew, if you wouldn't mind leading us in a roll call vote.
You bet. If I can ask who the second was first.
It was Director Cater Thompson.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and we'll start with Director Cater Thompson.
Yes.
Oops. Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Okrepke,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bagby,
Aye.
and Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And we see that motion passing.
And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our regular calendar, and we're going to start with a planning update, which I believe Chris will be tackling.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hopkins and Director. So I'm happy to introduce today Luke Lindenbush from the Napa-Sonoma Cooperative. So he's with us here today to talk a little bit about what the collaborative has done in the last 3 to 4 years. And one thing I would note is that this group has been very successful in assisting our local agencies get their housing element certified. And they have a lot of exciting things up on their work plan, including affirmatively furthering fair housing, working on infill development and VMT reduction. So with that, I'm happy to turn things over to Luke for his presentation on the collaborative.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Barney, for the introduction, and good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and board. It's my pleasure to speak to you today. I think I've met all of you and had an opportunity to present to each of you in your respective councils, or at the very least your planning commissions, over the last 3 years as we conducted the work of the Napa-Sonoma Collaborative. So really, as Chris noted, what I want to go over in this presentation today is discussing what we've accomplished in the last 3 years under REAP 1.0 and how we're going to be continuing the work of the Napa-Sonoma Planning Collaborative as we move into REAP 2.0 through the end of next year. So really just to give a high-level overview of the context of the program, the planning collaboratives were formed out of the regional early action planning grants and ABAG MTC's expenditure of those grants starting in mid-2021. Initially, REAP 1.0 was about $250 million that was allocated to MPOs and COGs around the state to help them really in implementing and planning for their fifth cycle housing element updates. It was administered by ABAG MTC's Regional Early Action Planning Program, which includes both regional and sub-regional efforts, ours being a sub-regional effort, but I would highly recommend all members of the board to look at what ABAG MTC has done in the totality of the Regional Early Action Planning Program and RHTA, because their products have really been emerged as a state model that I recommend to all of my clients throughout the state of California. What the Napa-Sonoma Planning Collaborative has done is provide both work products and on-call technical assistance to all of the 16 jurisdictions of Napa and Sonoma counties. We often get questions about what exactly is the collaborative? Is it a nonprofit? We have some nonprofits that have the word collaborative in it. Is it a consulting firm? We have some consulting firms, Community Planning Collaborative, one of them in the Bay Area, that's kind of pioneered this model of collaboratives. But really, I'm with Four Leaf, a consulting firm. We provide planning services directly to jurisdictions and also through ABAG MTC in this effort. And really, it's just a way for us to work with the region to disseminate resources and help make sure that all of our jurisdictions are aware of opportunities on a state and regional level, that we can really advance the most meaningful housing policy that we can on a local level. So to that end, we're a local liaison to ABAG MTC and also to the BAFA efforts, the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. I think we all know at this point that the BAFA bond isn't moving forward, but just want to highlight that that doesn't mean that BAFA isn't continuing to do good work on protection, preservation, protection of housing, anti-displacement efforts that we're working with them on as well. I also just think it's really helpful to note that, we're kind of this bridge between our local jurisdiction staff, between our regional government partners, between our partners at both SCTA and NVTA. We're kind of unique in the sense that we're the only collaborative that spans 2 counties. And it's an exciting opportunity to build on the good work that SCTA has done through the Planning Advisory Committee and other avenues that really allowed staff to come together and convene, maximize efficiencies, not repeat the same practices, but really learn from what other jurisdictions are doing. And it's unique in the sense that we have 2 counties. So we're able to build on the good work that Chris and his team has done with SCTA to bring staff together on a county level and also build those partnerships across the Mayacamas with our partners in Napa County. So again, just to kind of distill the difference between REAP 1.0 and REAP 2.0, now that this funding is doubled and we also have a larger scope of work to contend with. So in REAP 1.0, which concluded at the end of last calendar year, our focus was really on getting every jurisdiction in the county, in both counties, to get their housing element updates completed and certified by the state HCD. Our support also extended to aligned actions, which I'll get into a little bit further into this presentation. Going into REAP 2.0, as our jurisdictions all have certified housing elements and are moving into implementation, REAP 2.0 products have to fall into 3 key categories as defined by the funding itself. That's affirmatively furthering fair housing, infill development, and VMT reduction. So the VMT reduction piece is a little bit of a departure from our 100% housing policy work that was done in the first round of the collaboratives, but offers us an exciting opportunity to expand and nuance our work, especially as we see funding streams, work products, really in the planning field as a whole, taking the issues of housing, infrastructure, transportation, land use, and bringing them together in a way that's more cohesive. So first, I want to go into what we've been working on over the last 3 years. I know that I've had an opportunity to present to some of your boards and commissions, but it's great to have everybody in the same room to really just reflect on what we've done. Some of the issues that we're most proud of, I know this is a short presentation, not going to be able to get into everything we've done in 3 years, but really just want to highlight some of what has made the collaborative such a successful effort over the last 3 years. First and foremost, I just want to acknowledge that, with REAP or any kind of funding program that has really extensive reporting requirements, there's always this kind of tendency to really be focused on products. And that's really justified. Again, you look at the RHTA program and what ABAG MTC has done, and those products are replicable, they're useful, they're plug and play, and they really make staff, lighter work for staff to be able to implement their housing elements. But one of the things that really has emerged from the collaborative that has, I think, been what's made it such a success is the fact that we're really able to provide on-call TA. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the person who brought me into this profession from being a housing advocate and a policymaker for many years, but who really said, when I said, I don't know if I'm a planner, Jane Riley said, no, you're a planner and you're going to come around this collaborative. So I just want to say thank you to Jane, who's the other phone that rings when our staff has questions. They're calling Jane or they're calling me, and we do what we can to help them through it. That on-call TA and just having that personal touch, especially when, and I think we can be candid about the fact that local jurisdictions haven't always had the best relationship with ABAG MTC. ABAG MTC is the government and they're here to help. And sometimes just making sure to connect the local needs with regional and state resources is exactly that local touch that's needed. We're very proud to have a very hyper-local team. I'll just mention that here while I'm kind of talking about, some people have said you're an out-of-state consultant or out-of-town consultant, and I would say, if I could tell you the connection that I have to all of your jurisdictions, but just wouldn't have the time to do so. But we have, I'm a Sebastopolian, we have staff in Cloverdale, Windsor, Santa Rosa, and also talented staff throughout the entire state that help support our work. So I'm very proud of my team and all of the ways that we've been able to help innovate our policies here on a local level through the collaborative. And the collaborative has also sometimes been described as group therapy. I'm not a licensed psychotherapist, nor do I want to be one. I'm again grateful that I fell into planning. But ultimately, I think that's one of the areas where, especially when we have had staff that were preparing their housing elements in COVID, not only feeling like they were jurisdictionally working in a silo, but doing all your work just from your living room and, just not necessarily feeling like you can have that kind of cross-pollination that can just come from being in an office. It was an opportunity for us to really work with all of our jurisdictional staff and for them to be able to talk to each other and have someone that they could speak with as well. I think we forged really strong relationships, again, leveraging the partnerships that were built on a staff level by SCTA for many years. And Sonoma County was the first fully certified county in the Bay Area, and just want to celebrate that win and all of the hard work that went into it on a staff level, all the different consultants that prepared housing elements, all the decision makers here and elsewhere. And we were the first county in the Bay Area that was fully certified, and then a couple months ago, Napa County joined, and we were the first fully certified collaborative in the Bay Area as well. So very proud of that. Now I just want to get into some of the products that we developed over the course of the housing element that were very helpful. On the developer panel, that was where we were able to sort of truth test the validity of sites that were going into housing element site inventories by just openly asking developers, hey, would this site work for the type of housing that is being written into the housing element? Believe it or not, that was kind of a first that, there was that kind of truth testing of sites. But it helped develop those stakeholder relationships that were able to really inform the plans and also helped to determine and establish the validity of sites when those plans were going in front of HCD. I'm going to talk a little bit more later about Housing Connect. This is an award-winning tool that we developed in our collaborative to really help our jurisdictions in the development of their annual progress reports, or APRs, that are due every year on April 1st. This is a way for jurisdictions on an annual basis to look at the housing element sites inventory through a public map and really be able to see the progress happen in real time. So it can be a much more transparent function of the APR itself. So the APR isn't just sitting on a shelf. It's something you can actually go check and see, hey, where's this housing happening? Where has housing not been permitted or developed that is in our housing sites inventory? The part about Housing Connect, because I think the map gets all the attention that I always want to bring up is, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second too, but there's over 600 programs in our 16 jurisdictions for all of the housing elements. And you can go into the Housing Connect tool, look at the list of programs and click a button, click the program, and it'll take you directly to the page in the housing element where that program's located. So as someone who's often on that side of just trying to sift through all these 600 programs, I'm personally very grateful for that one. In addition, with our mapping tools, we really try to be as responsive as possible to new state laws, providing applicability mapping as density bonus law changes, as there's new streamlining provisions for multifamily and missing middle housing. And this is work that we're excited to continue and integrate into the Housing Connect tool as we move into REAP 2.0. Finally, not finally, actually, we've got a lot more. State legislative updates on housing and planning policy. I think this is an area where the sheer breadth of it kind of makes a lot of planners' eyes cross and they make mine light up. I really like doing the presentations on legislative updates and really helping our staff look through this list of hundreds of housing bills every year and kind of give them a sense of, okay, these are the ones that really require local action or the ones that you don't need to have an ordinance to adopt because it's just part of state law now. In addition, community engagement has really been a cornerstone of our collaborative process. We've hosted a regional housing fair and supported other jurisdictions in developing theirs. We also hosted an equity working group very early on in the process to help inform the fair housing section of the housing element update. That was a new part of the housing element to make sure that we could really hear directly from stakeholders that are involved, in particular with farm worker housing and other communities of highest need within Sonoma and Napa counties. And finally, I'll talk about this a little more in a second too, but pro-housing designation support. We have the most designees in the state. HCD told me a couple weeks ago that they think I've probably prepared more than anyone else, which it certainly feels like it. It's been a lot of work, but that's been one way that we've been excited to help make sure that we can align local policy and also never leave money on the table. So just to still from our housing resource fair that we're excited to continue to have these events. It's a program that's in a lot of local jurisdictional housing elements and an area where we're excited to take them to different communities so we can have a more local approach, bringing our next housing resource fair to Napa next. To dig in a little bit more on the pro-housing designation, we were the first pro-housing majority county in the state. We have 6 out of our 10 jurisdictions that are designated and are moving toward full adoption, hopefully soon here. And one of the reasons, not just to put a feather on our caps and be able to say that we're pro-housing, but this is really comes down to the funding. And that was a reason why we were pretty singular in the collaboratives in supporting our jurisdictions with this. We were able to do so because our housing elements were getting certified faster than the rest of the Bay Area. So it was a natural pivot point for us to say, okay, this is a way for us to move into implementation and also think strategically about how we can really draw down as many state dollars as possible. So the pro-housing designation offers funding priority for, yes, housing programs, but the name might not suggest that really a lot of it gives priority for transportation and infrastructure programs, affordable housing and sustainable communities, transit and intercity capital rail program, the infill infrastructure grant. These kinds of funding sources that are more and more competitive as funding resources narrow. It's really important for jurisdictions to be able to have this priority and be able to get those extra points on their application. City of Healdsburg recently got an ASIC grant for the Saggio Hills project. That's one area where their pro-housing designation really was able to help put them over the edge in obtaining that funding. There's also a direct pool of funding called the Pro-Housing Incentive Program, which is only available to jurisdictions that have received the pro-housing designation. And to date, over $2 million has been awarded to our jurisdictions for housing rehabilitation primarily, but it's a pretty flexible source of funding in contrast to a lot of funding sources that have really specific strings about what you can do with it. So this is an exciting opportunity for our jurisdictions to continue to tap into. And I'll just note that there is a NOFA out now for jurisdictions that have not yet received their PIP funds toward the end of this year. And to reiterate some of Housing Connect and just give an indication of, sort of what this looks like. You see the different colors on the map there that show what the different housing element shows in real time the development of housing element sites. It's also a tool that can interface with staff's permitting software. So there's a way on the back end to make it so it can update automatically, and supporting our jurisdictions in helping, streamline those back end processes is one of the areas that we're excited to focus on in the next year or so. So now that we've discussed REAP 1.0 and some of the ways that we collaborated in achieving certification, I really want to just preview what we're going to be up to through the end of 2025, looking for ways to innovate our housing and land use policy and implement our housing element programs. So housing element implementation is really top of mind for us as we move into this next phase. And we're working to develop a housing policy menu with different policy options, gradients of policy options that may be more or less palatable to jurisdictions based on their individual needs. And these will supplement the regional resources that the RHTA program has been putting out through ABAG MTC. The way that we're prioritizing this is through the list of HCD priority programs. These are listed in every jurisdiction's housing element certification letter, and they show really the programs that HCD believes are essential to sustain and uphold housing element compliance over the SIC cycle. Additionally, we're prioritizing AFH, affirmatively furthering fair housing programs. And those with imminent deadlines. Again, there's about 600 programs that we have here, and about half of those have 2024 action items. They don't all have to be implemented in 2024, but this was really a pinch point for our jurisdictions in this housing element cycle that HCD really wanted to see that jurisdictions were making a move on their programs as early as possible in the cycle. So it's going to be a little bit of a sprint in the next year, and we're here to help. So to go into some of the implementation items, some of the work products are sample ordinances that both implement the housing element and can really proactively respond to changes in state law that we're closely monitoring. So if there's model code ordinance that's adopted now, making sure that it's as anticipatory as possible of changes that otherwise might need to be completed in the 7th cycle. Public communications as well are a big part of the housing element programs. There's a number of state laws, particularly around fees, that have to do with transparency, making sure that a jurisdiction's fees are listed on their website, that there are applications for housing streamlining opportunities for developers, really helping in any way that we can to make sure that the suite of products on every jurisdiction's website are as up to date as possible. In addition, we're excited to continue the Housing Connect tool. and expand our applicability mapping as state law changes. So property owners, developers, jurisdictions can have an understanding in real time of whether these laws that are potentially upzoning or changing the density bonus law apply to their parcels. As always, we're available for presentations to boards, councils, and commissions. If you can't tell by now, I really enjoy this. So happy to come meet with your jurisdictions and talk with them more. In addition, as I noted, the VMT reduction strategy is the part that's really different. So that's one area where we're still identifying the path forward for working with our regional partners at SCTA and VTA. But also we've started conversations with our collaboratives in Marin and Solano County, because I think we can all understand that our transportation issues don't just stop at our county borders. It's really important for us to consider the ways that our transportation system as a whole can really consider some of the VMT reduction challenges when people are traveling many, many miles to get to work. In addition, fair housing resources will be some of the core implementation items in the housing policy menu, introducing some of the anti-displacement work that will help satisfy both housing element implementation and TOC policy implementation, which I'll get into in a second. And again, looking at farm worker housing issues and how we can continue to advance opportunities for farm workers to obtain affordable and attainable housing here in Sonoma County. And finally, I just added the TOC and pro-housing policy implementation here, and I would just add on to there some of the work that my former employer before I became planner generation housing has been working on. A lot of the time, these policy interventions that are recommended and that qualify jurisdictions for funding and that implement their housing element are the Venn diagram is a circle. There's one thing that can be done, and if there's that precision in considering sort of all of the different ways that the policy can be done to accomplish many things at once. Those are all kind of the cross sections that we're looking at as we're developing our policy work. So moving forward, I want to get into just some innovative opportunities. These are some state laws that since in the last couple of months have sort of come up, and just want to make sure that they're brought to the forefront, because there are some state laws that we talk about and then others that are a little more under the radar, but that are very exciting. One, education workforce housing. This is an important issue for me as the son of a retired Sonoma County public school teacher. As new state legislation allows by right housing on lands that are owned by school districts. So we're really looking for ways that we can communicate with our jurisdictions and our districts about the schools that actually are able to take advantage of this new legislative opportunity to develop affordable housing for educators. And we found that out of the 46 districts in the 2 counties, 31 are in qualifying infill areas under the legislation. So looking forward into the next year for continued community engagement, stakeholder engagement, education around this opportunity, mapping and coordination between all of the different agency partners that may potentially be able to develop more teacher housing, which we currently do not have in Sonoma County, although there's been some interest on the part of SCO and other agencies. Another opportunity is housing on faith-based lands, and very similar to the other bill. It has a lot of the same development standards and criteria for developing this housing and where it qualifies, the kind of infill areas that it needs to be in. And we found that in our initial analysis that there's about 430 acres of faith-based land in Sonoma County and 189 total parcels. And across the 2 counties, a higher proportion of them than our schools are in infill areas. So this is another opportunity to really work with mission-aligned partners. Churches, religious organizations have a long history of being involved in affordable housing, especially here in the North Bay. So this is another opportunity for us to look at ways that we can expand our development capacity for affordable housing. And the last of these kind of just innovative opportunities, things that are on the cutting edge of state housing policy that we can look at, are opportunities to streamline missing middle housing. Earlier this year, Senate Bill 684 went into effect, which allows streamlined subdivision of 10 or fewer units on multifamily zone parcels between 1/2 acre and 5 acres. This is at the default density, which you may remember from your housing element process of 20 units an acre or 30 units an acre in Santa Rosa. And so this allows subdivision, for sale units, townhomes, plexes, things of that sort. It may sound like a high density, but you think of an average 6,000 square foot lot, 20 units an acre, that's about 3 units, 30 units an acre, that's about 4 units. So it kind of builds on the work that's been done with state ADU law, with Senate Bill 9, allowing duplexes and lot splits, but allows greater flexibility in those being able to be for sale units to individual owners. In addition, going into effect in July of this year, Senate Bill 1123 expands on XB 684 to apply the same provisions, basically the same provisions. The lots have to be a little bit bigger on vacant single-family parcels. So slightly expanded version of the same law, basically as it first went to the Senate last year. And then finally, SB 10 is an opportunity for jurisdictions that is not mandated. The first two are required. But Senate Bill 10 allows jurisdictions to allow up to 10 units on parcels of their choice. So if you're looking at opportunity for these bills to be applied in your jurisdiction, this is one area where that could be expanded. Doesn't have to be 10 units. You can set it at a cap of 4 with SB 10 if you want. And again, this is an opt-in. You won't be subject to the provisions of SB 10 unless your jurisdiction adopts an ordinance. I'll also just note as well, since this question comes up a lot, that Senate Bill 10, the implementing ordinance, is exempt from CEQA. The projects aren't necessarily, but could apply for an infill categorical exemption. And it's also those units that are produced under SB 10 are also exempt from a jurisdiction's growth management ordinance. So these are some opportunities to really move forward on missing middle housing. If you've been looking for more opportunity and aren't seeing those SB 9 duplexes being built in your community, which I'm sure you haven't because they haven't really been coming up much, these are a couple of different tools that our communities can use to advance this policy work. And moving toward the end of the presentation, I want to get into the transit-oriented communities policy. Daniel Saver from MTC was here a couple months ago to present on this, but I've been working on a TOC plan and it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I wanted to bring it back up, especially just because don't want any of our jurisdictions to miss out on this funding opportunity. Before I worked as a planner, I worked in fundraising, so you can tell that comes up a lot. I really want to make sure that we can get money for our Sonoma County communities. This is coming up in 2026, regional policy that requires both programs and zoning for both housing and commercial development, parking management standards, station access for areas within a half mile of SPART. Or jurisdictions also have the option of opting in and being able to access this funding. So if you want to implement the TOC policies in a priority development area, commercial corridor that has some opportunities for housing, mixed use development, this would be an option as well. It's important to note that compliance with the TOC policies, the teeth here is that retains local access to the One Bay Area grant funding, public works infrastructure funding. That's pretty key for our jurisdictions. So just because it's coming up soon and is due on November 22nd, I really wanted to highlight and make sure that our electeds are aware of this, that this is one-time $60 million funding, $20 million for policy, $40 million for improvements that can also be used around smart stations. If there's sidewalk gaps, if we want to put in greater EV charging, the funds are pretty flexible on both sides of that. So would highly recommend connecting with staff to make sure that we can take full advantage as a sub-region of these opportunities. And I don't usually include links in my presentation, but I put it there because this one's important. So now to go into some key timing and milestones as we move toward what may be the end of the collaborative project. The collaborative returned in September. So if you're wondering, why haven't I heard from the collaborative this year? There was quite a bit of uncertainty with the REAP program itself. It was a doubling of the funding, but at the beginning of this budget year in the governor's initial budget, that funding allocation was $0. So we went from that to potentially 20% funding to thankfully having full funding restored. But we just started our efforts back up last month. So it is going to be a little bit of a sprint into the end of 2025 to get some of this implementation moving. Those funds do expire at the end of next year. And as of now, there's no anticipated renewal. Of course, budgetary situations at the state level are always changing and they could come back. But regardless, succession planning is built into our contracts with all of the collaboratives. So we're considering, if the collaborative stops at the end of 2025, how can our work continue? How can it be reallocated? And what is that going to look like? So don't want to get too ahead of ourselves with those conversations as we haven't discussed with staff to the full extent yet. But some ideas that have been floated, and we would be interested in hearing more about from this board, are exploring the formation of a sub-region for our arena. That's one area that the collaborative may be involved in, the CDC, SCTA. This was really emerging from some consternation around the allocations of arena in the sixth cycle, particularly with the large allocation to unincorporated Sonoma County, especially as we're moving toward more city-centered transit-oriented growth. May make sense for the county to come together and decide how we're going to divide our arena instead. In addition, one area that's been floated and that's also been implemented in San Mateo County, which was one of the early adopters of the collaborative model, is forming a joint powers authority or something along those lines, having it hosted within a regional agency for a shared planning housing staff, should the collaborative not continue. There's also been discussion of opportunities, a lot of interest in developing regional or multi-jurisdictional housing trusts. There's new state legislation that provides flexibility for cities that might want to form one on their own or with other cities or with tribal entities. So there's a lot of options in terms of how that could move forward. But just before we get too ahead of ourselves, just want to let you know, succession planning is happening. And so if you're thinking about, okay, what's going to happen in 2031 when we're going into our next housing element cycle, it's never too early to start talking about that. So finally, just want to open it up for questions and discussions, asking each of you which local housing policy action is your jurisdiction's top priority or top priorities. You don't have to pick one. What would you like to see from the collaborative or RHTA going into next year? I ask this because there's also a regional contract that we're a part of now. So if there's products that expand beyond the purview of Napa and Sonoma County, and we can take something that we've done or something that's of interest here and apply it to the whole region, we can look at it either sub-regionally or regionally. I've also included my email here for any further questions. Always happy to answer calls, texts as well. We're here for staff, first and foremost. That's the function of the collaborative, but we're also here for all of our electeds as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair Hopkins. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luke. In the interest of time, I'm going to go to public comments and then bring it back to the board for shared comments and questions. So do we have anyone in person who wishes to comment on this item? Seeing none. Drew, do we have anyone online who wishes to speak to this item?
I am currently not seeing any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, Chair Hopkins.
All right, with that, I will bring it back to my colleagues. Director Hinton.
Hi, Luke.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about the farm worker housing because obviously we have Woodmark and Sebastopol, and I just recently got an email that we are not having that many farm workers apply because the concerns are, or the obstacles are, they either get paid in cash or they have housing on the property that they work and it's incorporated in their situation. And I have asked, well, what's our second choice? We can't leave all these units open. I'm waiting for that response, but since you're kind of an expert in this area, I was wondering if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into it further. I think there's a lot of complexities in terms of matching opportunities with tenants for farm worker housing. Documentation status is often a factor given some of the requirements of state and federal funding. So it's certainly a challenge, but happy to discuss with you further on opportunities to enhance community engagement, make sure that farm workers are aware of the opportunity.
Okay, yeah, thanks. If you could follow up with me by email or something. And it's really current right now. Like I've heard about this in the last few days. So thanks.
Gladly.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful new housing development that
Agreed.
drive by on a regular basis. I'm just thinking maybe Grayton Day Labor Center might also be a good kind of community organization to partner with on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're just, we don't want to leave it empty. And so I'm trying to figure out, is it only farm worker housing or is there a backup plan? I mean, teachers, firemen, like that would be great to offer it further if a timeline passes or something. Anyway, we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, excellent question. Other comments, Director Rabbit?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just on that, I did just talk to Burbank Housing in Petaluma. They have a farm worker housing under construction. They didn't get enough applicants on the farm worker side, and it was told to me that was because a typical farm worker in Sonoma County actually doesn't qualify, makes too much money, and what they actually turned to was retired farm workers because of the fixed income element that they have So for what it's worth, that was from Burbank, who's building a large farm worker housing, and it's a state law, so I don't think you can swap it out with a different occupation. Luke, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. It's great to see the REAP programs through 1.0 and 2.0 being used so successfully, and just proud of the work that ABAG and MTC have done to make sure that the monies were available, and to continue to advocate when, as you said earlier, the governor slashed the budget to zero and going back up. This is part of what Steve Bertelbaugh mentioned very early on, was SB 375 and the sustainable communities. It's all interrelated. And this is really a way for not just to achieve the arena goals that everyone has, but also talk about that city-centered growth that we all take so seriously here in this county. And I know that REAP through OPR and Strategic Growth Council and CARB have been working on this and really convinced the governor that those were funds that shouldn't go away, but that should be back into the system. And so appreciate that very much. And I do know that we're in a strange economic time right now with some projects not moving forward for a variety of reasons. Construction costs are through the roof, and interest rates are in a delicate place, to say the least. But it still means that we can plan ahead for when those things are going to crack, that we're all ready to go and to be able to build those, especially on the transit oriented side. So thank you for all the work. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Director Cater Thompson.
Quick question. Luke, I'd like to connect with you because the city of Petaluma is doing their general plan update and looking at the land use, because that's what we're working on right now. And I'd like to connect with you as soon as we can.
Yeah, gladly. Thank you.
Great. Director Giudice.
Thank you for that presentation. Yeah, I'm going to introduce you to the superintendent of the Cotati Roanoke Park Unified School District. They have a big chunk of the university district that they own, and the superintendent Mayte wants to move forward and develop that property. So I'll provide that introduction, and thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? One thing that I want to acknowledge was I appreciate you sort of looking into the future and thinking about, the next sort of housing element cycle and how we might potentially coordinate RENA allocations in the future. That was a conversation that I had a few times with, I guess I'll call him Director Emeritus Chris Rogers, and just in terms of, it didn't really make sense the way the allocations ultimately came down, with thousands of units going into unincorporated Sonoma County, which was not really a transit-oriented or city-centered form of growth, which is what we really try to support here. At the same time, not many cities were willing to take on additional housing units unless there were also sort of, dollars or support that would come with those. And so this is kind of the one county-wide body that's already looking at transportation and climate and many things that are very integrated with housing. And so it sort of seems like if there were going to be public conversations about future allocation sharing, that, this might be sort of a JPA that could be amended to include those conversations. So I just wanted to say that seeing what a cluster that last process was, it would be really wonderful to try to prevent maybe none of us here, maybe some of us still here, but the next round of folks from going through that kind of similar experience, and to also really just promote and foster true collaboration and coordination, because at the end of the day, we all want to create live-work communities where you have a match between, jobs and schools and, and living situations. And I think it's going to take regional planning in order to get that done. So just kind of planting the seed for the future and looking forward to that conversation. I don't know what that would look like or how we would mechanize that going forward, but maybe there are opportunities to bring this back in between now and the next housing cycle and think about how we can get out ahead of it this time. And the other thing that I want to say is please say hi to Jane Riley for me and for all of us. She's someone that I very much miss working in county government, but I'm glad that we're still getting to work with her through 4-Leaf. So any final comments or questions for the good of the order? Seeing none, thank you so much for the informative presentation. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we will be going on to our quick build best practices, which I believe is Margot presenting.
I learned so much from the previous presentation. So hopefully this will provide kind of a nice overlay, because obviously if we house these people, we want to help them with their mobility. But good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and the board. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to watch my time. My goal is to give you a quick primer on quick builds, which are sometimes referred to as demonstration projects or rapid implementation projects. So as you know, in August, our team submitted a Safe Streets for All application specifically for some quick build projects in the county. And in many ways, this is our first really formal foray into the quick build strand, which is meant to really address traffic safety as well as some opportunities and address some concerns around climate change. So as we build this practice with our city partners in the county, we're constantly going to be circling back to learn and strengthen and hopefully scale across the county some of our quick build opportunities. Well, relative to the photograph, this is Forestville. We do not actually have a quick build project currently scoped, but I thought I would just call it out because this is the type of location that reflects a typology that could really benefit from a quick build project, largely because it incorporates some of those key site location criteria. For example, there's probably a mix of residential and commercial. There may be limited public open space or public amenities. It's a high pedestrian traffic area in certain parts of the time or the year. Additionally, as I mentioned, a commercial district. There may be some intersections with some real safety concerns. It may also be an environmentally stressed area. So we'll continue to look for these types of locations that bring many of those criteria together. Next slide. Oh, I do. Oh, I'm armed and dangerous. Okay. Oh, okay, there we go. So I consider this the quick build life cycle in many ways. The trend in quick builds actually launched in the 2010s and has in fact really become a tool that a lot of more urban than rural areas are starting to use to obviously enhance the safety for the non-motorized users and hopefully accelerate that shift. We're all keen to see more active transportation users on the road. So hopefully this may be a way to accelerate it. The goal is really to get these types of projects done in a year, if possibly not less. One of the things that we're working on is really building what I'll call a quick build toolkit. And this is a tool across the county, a resource we'd like to make available for the county, largely because quick builds shortcut a really complex planning process that it is usually associated with capital projects. Once we put them out there, we can test them, iterate them, tweak them, all with minimal costs. And then lastly, we can evaluate, get the feedback, because ultimately we have to build them out permanently, but we'll need the funding to build them out permanently, and this will sharpen our application. So what goes into a quick build toolkit? As part of our application prep process this last August, we brought a couple of the cities together to figure out where, or let me start with, we brought them together to think about the tools or the types of elements that we would like to put out there and where there might be possible synergies. So for example, what you see up here is two types of treatments. We have what we call curb extensions, and we have traffic circles. And you can see by the visuals, there are many ways in which they can manifest themselves out there in the public space. So one of the objectives in bringing this workshop together is for the cities to share, how's it going, what's been working, what's not working, who's complaining, who is, applauding it, et cetera, so that maybe together we can identify those materials that actually have weathered the street the best, and also develop standard plans that we can share among the cities. So there's a common approach, manifestation to getting them out there. We have a common understanding of the types of materials, perhaps the best vendors to work with, streamline a procurement process, but in general, find all those components of a toolkit of plans, policies, materials, vendors, costs, so that we can more expediently get the projects up and out there. So if we were to have a toolkit, what are some of the types of treatments? So as you'll see in red, the categories are those that may reconfigure the road, those that bring more bicycle facilities, those that reduce speeds, those that help improve the intersection, maybe reclaim some of that currently vehicular space for pedestrians and bicyclists, and also prescribe some traffic lanes or in fact also help to reduce the speed. So as part of this toolkit process, as part of this toolkit building, we also do want to localize some of these treatments. For example, I do know there's some concerns about using certain materials that we don't want them running off into storm drains and causing toxin issues, et cetera. So we'll be careful about understanding that. We also don't want to trigger any ADA requirements because that's a whole lot of civil engineering that we just don't have time for with a quick build. So let's take a look at some of those that are in the area. These may already be familiar to you, but in the city of Petaluma, for example, we have both some spot locations and a corridor. So in the top left corner, you see that is a mini roundabout, meaning it's an all-way stop location that was converted to a yield location. And similarly, on D Street, they have a full corridor where they've reclaim space for bicycle lanes. They've narrowed the travel lane and also slotted in, for example, on the top right, you'll see where there is pass-through for the bicycles, but not for vehicles. So again, just a way of making those intersections more predictable, particularly to those that are walking and biking. Another example in Roner Park, this is about 1 block east from the entrance of a school area. So again, a mini roundabout, but this one being built with modular kit materials as opposed to your paint and bollards. But again, roundabouts are a way of calming the traffic before they actually end up crossing through the school entrance area. And speaking of schools, we have another example here in Santa Rosa on Steele Lane and exactly in front of Steele Elementary School. As you can see by these pictures, we've sort of gobbled up some of that vehicle space, lined and flexed delineator it out so that we're really formalizing and making more predictable the vehicle space and emulating a curb extension, which really shortens the crossing when many of those kids are moving out of the school building and across the street. And now sort of with a little bit of a turn, considering we are SCTA and RCPA, quick builds may offer an opportunity to start cross-pollinating some of the transportation as well as the climate protection. So I put before you some examples of quick build projects which have clearly reclaimed that below curb space for non-vehicular use. One of the climate protection advantages, it's reducing the emissions in the air in that area, it's reducing noise, and it's providing perhaps much necessary recreating or convening space for the community. And there are also opportunities to experiment with surface treatments, as you'll see in the middle, is a rather artistic approach there to some public space. In addition, I think these are also what I'll call these canvases where we can experiment with greening. Increasingly, there's interest in bolstering our tree canopy in many of the urban areas. I probably don't have to tell you this, but increased tree canopy, obviously it's going to enhance personal comfort. We are increasingly in need of almost healthy refuge during these heat crises. So allowing people to gather and commune in places that are cooler and not necessarily dependent on the electric grid, and also just generally enhancing the attractiveness of the public space area. There are cities that are experimenting with putting street trees in the below curb space now, and in many ways they've become bookmarks for future, more permanent projects. And there's also an opportunity to use these quick builds to trial some of these new materials, maybe some recycled plastic materials or modular green space units. And then lastly, almost more perhaps in a programming sense, there are opportunities within an area that has been built out for quick build, perhaps it's a plaza or again, extensive below curb space, where you could add treatments or equipments as you see here, which could be part of a data collection net, better understanding environmental data, air quality, heat, air pollutants, et cetera. or adding solar powered value adds that would bring people into the community. So you see a series of solar powered convening workstations. You can charge your elements, but you can also work there within shade, as well as laying solar powered or shading elements over a playground or larger spaces publicly. So I think I'm excited about the opportunity to keep exploring those. And as we wait with our fingers crossed for the Safe Streets for All in November, we may have the opportunity to explore some of this bringing together of the two sides of our organization. But I also think we have to be open to the fact that bringing these two components together also requires some out-of-box thinking around maintenance and procurement and who's at the table when we're thinking about these projects from the beginning so that we're all ending up at the finish line together. So it may be rethinking some policies, some urban forestry or planning techniques or policies. Maybe there's a new way to engage community partners. And also on the technology front, I'll be the first to raise my hand that I'm pretty naive about it now, but I know that there are a lot of technologies out there that we could be integrating into these spaces to help us better understand them and make them work more effectively for the community. So on that note, I'll take any questions.
Wonderful. And again, I'll ask if any members of the public have any comments or questions on this item in person. Seeing none, Drew, do we have any online or in advance?
I did not receive any public comments in advance, and I currently do not see any members of the public with their hands up wishing to speak on this item, Chair Hopkins.
Thank you so much. So I will bring it back to my colleagues, Director Bagby, Vice Chair Bagby.
Yeah, it's a great presentation, and I'm very interested in seeing this move forward. I think that, you know, in my city, we actually have, I think I've talked about this here before. We have streets that are really, really wide, and people are always ask, why are those legacy streets so wide? It's so a horse and cart can turn around. That's literally why the streets are that wide, and we need to retrofit them for climate and for pedestrian safety. And I think that it actually, what I would love to see at some point is some kind of a study and path forward for how much it would actually save us on our paving programs if we implement some of these, you know, greening initiatives, bicycle and pedestrian initiatives. How much could that actually, you know, reduce our mind-bogglingly huge paving budget? And then secondly, where are some areas that you might see like Proposition 4 and some opportunities, and where this crosses over for municipalities?
Could you explain Proposition 4 to me?
Climate bond.
Oh, now you're asking me to comment on something that I am not. So would you
Oh,
like to
that's
help me
okay, but
out?
we can save it for somebody else. But I kind of
That's
like
fair.
to see, I'm very interested in seeing some strategies for funding, or, you know, because basically
Absolutely.
you've given us some wonderful strategies and we have some potential funding opportunities. So that would be something I'd love to hear about either today, or maybe preferably when the thing actually passes and we know what we're going to have.
I'll just say that Tanya and I have been working with our legislative folks. The polling has been very strong on Prop 4 to date, and we are targeting several of the programs within there if it does come to fruition, and leveraging our status as a climate resiliency district. Although that was not called out specifically in the legislation, we think that is something of value that we want to promote.
We're on it.
Wonderful. Other comments from my colleagues? Director Cater Thompson.
So when we're talking about heat islands, and I think of the smart trails, which are certainly heat islands, I'm assuming, how do you deal with that since it's not part of a quick build? It's part of smart.
That is, I don't know the answers to that. I am most say knowledgeable or most familiar with those types of projects that are happening in a city jurisdictional's right of way and primarily the below curb area. So I'll presume, obviously, it's smart owning that and or a park and recreations, because a lot of those trails are going through perhaps park area. So that is not an area that I am so familiar with. That's not to say that there wouldn't be opportunities, perhaps to the point of, is there shading opportunities? Are there ways of amplifying convening spaces that are shaded perhaps to some of these visuals? Potentially, I would just have to familiarize myself about how we could partner with the people that could in fact make the difference there.
I appreciate that. And it is city and county, so
Okay.
it would have to be coordinated that way also.
Yep.
That gives me good information though. And then I just want to talk about some of the projects that have been in Petaluma. And of course, it's extremely controversy, this D Street, but I'm getting a lot of positive
Yeah.
comments from people. And the ones that are negative they're going to just continue to be negative. And, you know, even if you have 1/8 of an acre, you're now backing out to make it unsafe, even though you could back in your own driveway. So games like that are being played. But generally, I'm getting a lot of positives
Good.
on it instead of the negatives. And the longer these quick builds are implemented, because we're going to be doing a major road project below, it seems like people calm down and they start appreciating it. And I mean, I'll use my husband as an example. He's actually slowing down. And, you know, we don't realize how fast we drive.
Right.
And then when you start seeing your surroundings, it makes a difference.
Absolutely.
So
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah,
We-
and you know, and I'm getting the letters of positive, and the negative ones are the same people every week. And
No,
so,
I appreciate that. And we've stayed in touch with some of the city, with Bjorn and Jeff, and we've been connecting with them. So they will also provide us some of that feedback. I think there is an opportunity. There are quick builds, and I would love to say for every quick build we put out there, the funding is available so that within a year, we're transforming it into something permanent. I think we do need to be eyes wide open that quick build projects, when they do get put out there, could be out there for up to 3 to 5 years. And so in thinking about that, because the trend of quick builds started in the 2010s and we're now in 2023 or 24, that maybe there's an additional thinking around the quick builds. And that's sort of where my interest is, in building in some of the resilience elements, so that if we're not able to get there to the permanent condition as quickly, what else, in addition to like D Street, the paint and bollards, are we doing it in a way where maybe it's a little denser with some of the resilience elements, but then there's the attractiveness, a bit of the durability, and it means more than just the transportation component of it. Because it is hard to turn around and get those capital projects in. So how do we make the quick builds work better for us while they're out there?
because there's another one in Petaluma on Rainier that it's like a partial quick build in, you know, 3 major sections. So it's the midsection. And over time, people, of course, hated it. And now people are saying, well, I can walk across the street safely, because on the east side, we have freeways everywhere.
Right.
I mean, they've just built 4 lanes and people are driving really fast. And that's my next question is, when we do these quick builds and then do the surfaces of the street, what we're finding is people are actually rolling through stop signs. And so actually looking at what could we do at intersections to make sure that people don't just drive away quickly or roll through the stop signs, was something I appreciate if we could all kind of look at what an alternative would be, whether it's speed bumps, you know, that work with fire departments or something, because that is a comment I get often.
Right. And I hope I'm responding correctly, which is because of such high non-compliance at all way stops, particularly in neighborhoods, the mini roundabout or the traffic circle, again, I make the distinction that a traffic circle is put in the middle of the intersection and always stop, versus the roundabout being one where you have the yield. So as I showed, there were 2 examples, either modular there. But don't hold me to this, and I have not received the approval of the executive directive, but there may also be, I don't know the cost, but there may be opportunities to break up some of the street surface and use it differently. I mean, I've seen where certain cities have actually started removing some of the pavement. And if there are ways, again, completely in reliant or in lockstep with those that are concerned about stormwater or the ability to capture the water quickly, there may be ways where let's not worry about repaving it. Maybe we should start taking a checkerboard approach to removing some of it, allow the absorption, plant some greenery as well. And potentially those locations could be in the middle of an intersection and be the footprint for a future more permanent there was an interesting New York Times article about mini urban forests, which they were starting to plant in the middle of intersections. But again, I'm thinking out of the box, but these may be kind of the next iteration of a quick build world.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Great conversation. Director Rabbit?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. Was the original intention of the quick build program to fix a known danger in a quick manner?
I would say yes, in the sense that it was, I think initially, we need to address traffic safety concerns. So when Vision Zero launched, and I'm trying to scratch my head when I helped to launch it in the city of LA, which was around 2015 perhaps, but around that time, with all this emphasis on safety, and we knew it took so long to build out a curb extension, et cetera. I think it came out of that. We need to act quickly. We're having endemic traffic violence. What is the solution?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the reason I asked was because my memory was that it was it was to fix an imminent danger to safety, but now it's also been used as in my opinion, because as an architect, aesthetics do matter. Quality materials do matter. I think for public infrastructure, it does matter. That has just been a less expensive, sometimes cheap looking solution as opposed to real, infrastructure improvement. And I live over by D Street, and I will say controversy is a little bit of an understatement, and those that live in that area probably feel otherwise. But I think some of that is the clutter that a quick build, and I know that there's places for them, and certainly want to encourage safety, but also the engineering behind that and actually addressing the problem other than just throwing more of these solutions on top of something because it quote unquote will do this or that without necessarily having the data to back that up. I do wonder.
Well, as one who partnered with an architect with the launch of the first plaza project that I did, it was pounded into me and it resonated that we would like these spaces to be aesthetic. So completely concur. And I think it's a good nudge when we think about convening the city partners that we've worked with so far around what I'll call that quick build toolkit. So thinking about the types of engineering plans, et cetera, that is the opportunity to also apply the visuals and the long-term beauty of what we're trying to do, so that if we can find a more common approach for doing them, maybe we can simplify the types of materials, but also look at the ones that are aesthetic. Because I really do believe that if we are going to shift this culture, as we keep saying, to prioritize for people that are not in cars, a really important component of that is also the attractiveness and the comfort of being in that space. And standing around between bollards and striping right now is not terribly comfortable or inviting. And I think we're missing that component because we've had to work in the expediency of trying to address the traffic violence issue. But now let's see how we can take it up one step further, but keep the toolkit slim but aesthetic so that multiple cities can maybe start putting these in place. Of course.
Director Corsi?
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. I really appreciate the conversation about aesthetics and, it's important, but the important for me in this is pedestrian cyclist safety. People being able to use our streets without being in a car, because we all have to do that. We keep making cars with more features about safety, and the number of people who are getting killed in cars keeps going up. And it's because people are going too fast and they're not paying attention to the job at hand. I think that when we talk about this, we need to concentrate, and you've got it in your report, but we didn't talk about the outreach and the educational element of this. Seen a lot of these projects in Santa Rosa and Petaluma. Some of them work better than others, but I think that they'll be more effective if we let people know what we're doing. Is this something that's going to be here forever? Is this something that we're trying to get feedback on? Who do you contact to let know that I think this is a good thing or a bad thing? We lose control of a narrative when it becomes an issue for Nextdoor or Facebook, instead of an issue that we're communicating with the community about directly. The loudest voices tend to win out in those kind of conversations. So I just think that, yes, let's continue to do this. Let's also make sure that the community knows what we're doing, what the purpose is. And that idea of, are we going to see these green bollards here forever? Or are we going to see something that makes this a better space for all of us? And this is just the first step.
I have a couple comments. I appreciate that. Couple things come to mind. As I was sort of thinking about this and knowing that I've been doing quick builds a while myself, one of the things that I've been revisiting, and I really thank our team here for some of the visioning that we've been doing around transportation and resilience infrastructure, is the framing. How are we talking to communities about our projects? And is the way that we're talking to them need to evolve and to be more robust, and perhaps evolve from just a transportation project to this is a climate protection or a climate mitigation as well as a safety project. And without leaving our engineering wonky language at home, framing it in a way that sort of connects with the heart of the community. You guys, when it gets hot, you want to step outside. You may not have your porches. So what is the role that the public space can be in your porch to bring you together? And it doesn't depend on being plugged into an air conditioner. So I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to evolve in is how we frame the conversation with the community. The second is there is a tool called pop-up events, which I might have touched on briefly, but those are one-day events that sort of you're setting it up with the hay bales as opposed to the bollards. And it's immersive in the sense that the community comes out and they touch it and feel it and say, this is coming. So it helps them better understand it before it drops down on their streets. Because outreach with a flyer or a Zoom meeting is just incredibly difficult for people to understand what's coming down the pike. And then thirdly, I think this is again, sort of to this last slide, which I had shared, we may need to think about the different partners to bring to it. Maintenance is an important component. And how are we bringing, the urban tree programs? How are we bringing the horticulture programs? How are we bringing Santa Rosa Junior College? They have different departments with a focus on forestry or agriculture or, Cool Petaluma, all these great partners who may have the staff or the bandwidth or the interest in directing their energies into a collaborative project, because maintenance ultimately is the Achilles heel of so many of these projects. And we can't weather that maintenance on our own, but if we think outside the box of who are new people to come to the table, that may also be a way to keep it maintained and get more people interested, so it doesn't feel like an afterthought that somebody put in there 6 weeks ago and they walked away from it.
Yeah, thanks. And just on the maintenance thing, I've noticed on several of these installations that they tend to get a lot of debris in the bollard protected area, which is
absolutely,
just discourages bicyclists from
absolutely. So finding those new types of equipment and finding the different type of person who maybe can activate that equipment on our behalf is something I think we need to be more aggressive in exploring.
I think the Bicycle Coalition has a bicycle powered
Yes.
lane sweeper.
We've seen it. I want to ride the bike with that thing attached, so. Yes.
Awesome. Director Okrepke?
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of agree with Director Rabbit when you use a term like quick build and you see the materials that are used that are, we'll call them more cost effective, it does kind of lend itself to negative input as, are we going to do this forever? Or like, why are we doing this? I would say the term I prefer is a demonstration project. I think from a marketing or branding standpoint, it's much better to use that to say, hey, we're doing this. This is a
Certainly.
demonstration of what we can accomplish quickly without putting in all of the more permanent, longer term infrastructure that's necessary. I mean, I look at Steel Lane that you used earlier, and we were demonstrating with the road diet and buffered bike lanes that it won't slow down the people using their vehicles. It won't cause severe traffic congestion. It did slow down traffic by a whole 4 seconds. But we proved that we can do a road diet. We can put in protected bike lanes in front of a school and it will still work the same way. Whether you're late for a meeting or if you bought a Uber for your burrito, it'll still be warm by the time it gets to your house. So I think using the term quick build doesn't do it any credit.
It's a good point.
But I think if you use the term demonstration project, it kind of lends itself to, hey, this is just the start of something that could be more permanent down the line.
Sold. Demonstration projects, they will be. So, and I think on that point, I appreciate the fact that we, again, through the maintenance and being out there more regularly is the checking in with the community and the evaluation. How is it going? It is a demonstration project for a future project. So if something isn't working in the demonstration phase, let's hear about it now. Or if we need to go bigger, because you've started to see changes and we have a little bit more flexibility in going bigger, now's the time to talk about it and then cement it in that type of scope to go chase for the capital project time. And then I have a particular soft spot for school areas, having been the director of Safe Routes to School in LA, and I had really crazy out of the box ideas of school streets twice a day and fully, or, tree canopying the streets in front of the main entrance. But I think those are areas where we just really have to drive home, excuse the pun, that these are really select areas where we need to minimize the speed and we need to make it comfortable, even after hours, the whole joint use opportunities with campuses blending into public space areas to be shaded and for recreating. There's so much to do with a school catchment area that those almost call out as places where we should be almost really robust around demonstration projects. See, already switching.
Thank you. Director, I've got a lineup. Director Vice Chair Bagby, then Director Tater Thompson, then Director Harvey.
Yeah, I'm really a big fan of the toolkit. So because for smaller jurisdictions, it's just so important to have, just a starting point because we just don't have the staff bandwidth. But I would point out that I think what we're also hearing is that there's a definite PR component or, community outreach component. So I think that definitely needs to be part of the toolkit. And I'll point out one I think that is very successful. And I love walking into, the parks and seeing the SB1 signs. I think that's this project paid for with SB1 funds. And it's just, they're very clear and very noticeable. And I think that's just a great example that as part of your budget, even if it is a quick build, is say, hey, this is what we're doing. And this is where we got them. These are your tax dollars at work.
Great suggestion.
Great.
Good suggestion. I just want to do my pet peeve, which is there are pickup trucks with tires, as wide as what's under the wheel. And then they're jacking these trucks up and you can't see anywhere because the trucks are so much higher than they used to be. But now when you bring them at an angle like this, you can't see in front of you with crosswalks. And it's really dangerous. And it just seems as though we need to have, if it's illegal to have tires that are wider than the trucks, we need to make sure as a county that people are being ticketed, that they need to fix these, maybe not at a cost, but you have 30 days to fix it because it's really dangerous. So when they're wider than the streets, there's a problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Harvey.
Yes, as we plan for these projects, I think maintenance needs to be included in the planning because I've seen a lot of the streets with the bollards and the bikes won't ride in them because they, especially now, because it's fall, they're so full of leaves and rocks and, some of them have been up for a while. So they've collected a lot of debris. And if they're not being used, then that kind of defeats the purpose. But I think maintenance as part of planning needs to be considered.
Fully. And I think the challenge to date has been much of the funding that's been made available to design and install demonstration projects. They have not allowed us to submit for maintenance. So I think either hopefully perhaps the funding source will evolve for it, but that also begs the question of who might be the right partners so that as we're applying for those types of projects or opting to fund it with one color of money, that we're finding the other type of money that can be applied to the maintenance.
Well, right, because it does us no good to put something in even at the demonstration level if it can't be kept up and it can't be used. So
Exactly.
that sort of defeats the purpose. So as part of the planning, someone needs to step up to incorporate maintenance. Otherwise, we end up with some of the situations we have now.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think we've seen it where there has been the rush, as we were talking about before, there's the rush to get the projects in, and then maintenance is no longer, we cannot have it be an afterthought any longer. So concur.
I want to thank all of my colleagues for the great conversations and questions. And I've got a couple of thoughts of my own. Actually, last Thursday, our Lower Russian River Municipal Advisory Council met to discuss something that's going to be going before the Board of Supervisors to create no parking or limited parking zones countywide. And there's a consideration for Armstrong Woods Road receiving that treatment on one side. One of the things that's really important about Armstrong Woods Road is it goes straight out from between downtown and the school. And also the senior center is right over there next to the school. And so tons of folks walk and bike on it. And the speed of traffic is extraordinarily fast. And there is no sort of formal bike lane or safe place for folks to walk. And then when there are sometimes very large RVs parked on the side of the road, it becomes even more dangerous because you have kids who are darting out, into the flow of traffic in order to get around these oversized parked vehicles. So I actually just on Friday emailed Johannes with a spreadsheet that I found online that had prices per mile of a whole bunch of sort of different versions of quick build bike lanes or demonstration project bike lanes. I like the branding. And so I might pass that information that I found online onto you and then see if we can solicit some feedback from the communities who have implemented this, see if we can actually get what is the true local cost per mile. And it was cool because it costed out a whole bunch of different things from bollards to various sized bumps to an actual curb and, ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 a mile, which seems very modest for putting in a bike lane. I also appreciate the aesthetic concerns, but the fact is that people are dying on our roads. And when we looked at that Vision Zero, risk, the Lower Russian River absolutely lit up because a lot of folks go really, really fast on those rural roads and they unfortunately come into contact with cyclists and pedestrians. I also just wanted to say thank you for using the phrase endemic traffic violence, because I think that, the more that we say that, we so often talk about traffic accidents. And that just makes it sound so much more innocuous than it really is. And what we saw recently outside of Rohnert Park, I believe on Stony Point, was what sounded like a case of serial road rage that resulted in the death of a mother of a 3-year-old child in front of his eyes. And, I think that we really need to try to create more safe spaces for bicyclists and pedestrians, to walk on. And it was great, though, I will say, on a brighter note, that, at that Thursday night MAC meeting, that's what folks were talking about. We started with no parking and they said, what we really need? We really need safe places for people to walk and bike because people want to get out of their cars. We live in a beautiful environment, a beautiful community. And you also create more community when you actually are outside in it and not just kind of in your single occupancy emergency vehicle driving like a bullet from place to place. So I'm really excited about this, and I would love to see like what are the next steps here? Like how can we disseminate more, practical information to all of our transportation planners, trying to get estimates of cost, and then how do we as a board set priorities that really encourage this kind of demonstration project, and then prioritize those areas that have successfully implemented demonstration projects for the permanent, more aesthetically pleasing long-term version of the project. Because I'm sensing that there is a lot of interest, both from this board and also from the jurisdictions and the staff that you've been working with. And so it would be really great to try to take this to the next level and make sure that, I'm hoping that when we have our sort of transportation plan that's coming up next month, is that right, on the agenda? Is that correct? Or the
Funding plan cycle 2?
Funding plan, yeah, that we can also sort of talk about different, opportunities going forward. So,
For sure.
great.
No, I appreciate your points. And I think lastly, I think parking is also a really interesting opportunity. Again, this is where potentially I'm putting on my old sort of county hat, where with the help of elected coverage, we can talk about, let's think about the parking puzzle a little differently. Are there ways to take advantage of consolidating parking where we then create the paths from more consolidated parking into the high pedestrian and bicycle use areas? So just thought off the top of my head, and yes, we are due to convene. I'm shooting for probably middle of November, bringing the city partners together again to talk about the quick build toolkit. And I know that there's regular attendance at many of the great forums that SCTA, RCPA host. So just continuing to have the conversation through those forums and check their pulse or get feedback on things may be the way to keep the momentum going on this. But we'll also keep you notified, obviously, if we hear from Safe Streets for All for 2024.
Great.
Fingers
One
crossed.
last question is, do we have funding opportunities for the truly pop-up events? And I think back, actually, my husband helped organize one in Roseland years ago, which was literally hay bales and then like trees and potted plants borrowed from local, hardware stores who were, like, sure, you can borrow my ficus tree for 24 hours and just bring it back afterwards.
Yes.
And so, and even like, had kind of
We've all
couches
been
or
there and done
beanbag chairs,
those, yes.
and it's really fun. And the community comes out and they get a sense of, hey, this is what it's like when you can actually go outside and it's not just cars, whizzing by and kind of reclaiming the public space. But I also feel like that's probably a tougher thing to find funding for, since it's,
Well,
not even semi-permanent.
True. So I have proposed, and it's in, again, we'll see if we're awarded, but in the Safe Streets for All, I really pushed hard for a pretty lofty budget for pop-up events. Because again, in my conversations with the cities, I felt, let's try to rethink how we do outreach, and these more immersive experiences really make they're a more memorable outreach experience. So we've asked for 3 to 4 pop-ups to be funded in advance of the demonstration project getting installed. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I feel like that would be really great to just have the opportunity to bring communities together to say, hey, what do you think? And that could also then provide feedback even for the demonstration project version of what, how far should this go? Should we go another block or shouldn't we? All those conversations.
And feel free to, if you'd like to connect me around the Armstrong Woods Road information, I'm happy to respond.
I will send you an email after this. Well, with that, any last comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for an excellent conversation and
well, thank
presentation.
you.
Really appreciate it. I know we still have a lot to get to. And so now we're going to jump over to our transit fare free amendment to policy 412. And I'm hoping maybe we can make this one a little shorter because the next one's probably gonna be a little longer. All right.
Yeah.
Take it away, James.
So apologies, Dana's out on jury duty today, and I have this item. It's a real good news with regard to Go Sonoma. So this is with regard to our Go Sonoma amendment to policy 4.1.2, which is with regard to transit fare-free programs. As part of Go Sonoma, you're familiar that 23% of the sales tax measure does go to transit, with 2% of that specifically set aside for fare-free programs. So this item will add the detail that we need within the Go Sonoma strategic plan for staff to be able to implement our fare-free program. The funds will be distributed to our 3 local bus operators based on transit service area population and will be reimbursed or will be, paid, distributed on a reimbursement basis. Both the existing and new fare-free programs will be eligible. So those pilot programs that are existing within our community right now that only have one-time funding will be able to be extended. Some examples of existing programs include fare-free for youth, fare-free for college students, fare-free for veterans. Future programs that these funds could be used for could be for seniors or could be for affordable housing tenants that have been considered and discussed amongst our transit operators. There will be a requirement for a new cooperative agreement to be entered into between Sonoma County Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, as well as Petaluma Transit for the distribution of these funds. And unclaimed funds by any one operator would be eligible to go to the other operator if they don't use the entire amount of their percentage based on their service area population. But we do expect every operator to completely expend these funds and even go beyond that. So the 18% of the 23% total, we actually expect the operators to use some of that funds to support fare-free implementation for their operations. With that being said, staff is requesting that the board approve SCTA Resolution 2024-019 for implementation policy under Go Sonoma for bus transit fare-free programs. That concludes my staff presentation.
Great. With that, I will ask if any members of the public in person wish to comment on this item. Seeing none, Drew, is there anyone online who wishes to remark on this item?
I currently do not see any members online wishing to speak on this item. Excuse me. And I also did not receive a pre-submitted public comment on this item as well.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will bring it back to my colleagues for any questions or comments. Director Cater Thompson.
Just have a comment that in Petaluma it's been extremely successful. And it is just, when you're talking about the low income housing, it seems as though if you're in low income housing that you should automatically be eligible because, with our sales tax so high for people to go and purchase things, this really offsets it. So low income people don't have to pay for transportation also. So it seems like equity really plays into the low income housing areas. And I'm just grateful that this happened and that I think it's like 58% were up in people using buses in Petaluma. And so it's been successful. Thank you.
That's great. Anyone else? Seeing none, anyone want to make a motion? All right. Motion by Director Cater Thompson. And was it Director Harvey with a second or? Okay. Okay. I thought you said something. I didn't know if I was putting the words in your mouth or, okay, great. All right. And with that, we will require a roll call vote on this one. Drew, would you mind leading us in a roll call vote?
Most certainly. And we will start with Director Cater Thompson.
Yes.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Harvey.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Hinton.
Yes.
Director Kelly.
Yes.
Director Okrepke.
Yes.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bagby.
Aye.
And Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And we see that passing.
Wonderful. And that will bring us on to item 5.4, which is our transit funding formulas for the coordinated claim. And I will hand it over to James for this one.
Great. So Ross is going to tee up a presentation to go over. So this is, includes a staff recommendation for how to move forward with our fiscal year 26 coordinated claim. We do not have a long-term funding recommendation. This would be a recommendation that would be for a limited term. It could be for 1 year. It could be for, a few years as we work on that long-term solution. We want to consider whether to make a request to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to revise Resolution 2858, dedicating 25% of Sonoma County TDA funds to Golden Gate Transit and revise the funding formula for the coordinated claim starting in fiscal year 26 to be reviewed at no longer than a 10-year period, although we expect it to be much sooner than that 10-year period. From the 9 entities that are part of the Marin and Sonoma Coordinated Transit Service efforts, it's the 5 that are on your screen now that receive funding from the coordinated claim. It is a zero-sum game, so any changes to the formula resulting in an increase for one operator will have a decrease for another operator. So briefly, what is a coordinated claim? So the coordinated claim distributes funds to our transit operators. It distributes funds, including the Transportation Development Act, that's the TDA acronym I've been referencing, State Transit Assistance, which is the STA acronym, Measure M, which is our local sales tax, soon to be become Go Sonoma, and our Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, or LCTOP. The other thing that it does is it actually documents interjurisdictional funding agreements between transit agencies. So when you look at the coordinated claim, the distribution of funds may include other exchanges between operators, such as Golden Gate Transit's use of the City of Santa Rosa Transit Mall. Putting policy context into play for each of these fund sources, let's start out with the Transportation Development Act. So that is where the resolution exists that's been passed by MTC dedicating the 25% to Golden Gate. We also dedicate 100% of those funds to transit, and the total each year is around $30 million of a quarter-cent sales tax. STA, or State Transit Assistance, those funds are come to the county by a block grant from state fuel tax or excise tax on diesel. And those funds total about $10 million a year. There is a performance-based formula for a piece of the STA funding to go to SMART that is capped at 20%. Lastly, LCTOP, or Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, that is part of the state's cap and trade program and generates just over $1 million that gets distributed out to our 3 bus operators. So currently looking at our coordinated claim that was passed in November of, it was passed in November of 24, so just earlier, excuse me, April of 24, just earlier this year, to cover all of fiscal year 25. Total little over $41 million, and this is the distribution between Golden Gate Transit, or Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, for operating bus transit in Sonoma County or Sonoma County serving routes. The dedication of those funds that went to SMART that were part of the STA component, as well as the component of those 3 fund sources that go to our local bus share between our 3 local bus operators. As part of looking at how these funds are expended, so they're essentially spended to operate buses, and the operation of buses are detailed on the sheet in front of you with regard to what the cost per hour to operate those buses are. We are working with Golden Gate on what their cost per hour operations are. The current number is at $412 that's been reported to us, but the TDA claims at $510 an hour for fiscal year 22, and then fiscal year 23, they're over $600 an hour for operations. So identifying, where we spend our dollars based on the cost to operate transit, and as you can see, our other operators are closer to around the $150 per hour based on the TDA audits. Alternatives that have been considered. So there's the 3 alternatives in black that were discussed at committees, as well as discussed at this board, to the transit ad hoc and this committee, which were essentially to defer, to do a full-blown dynamic formula of all fund sources between the TDA, the STA, and the LCTOP, or to do that fixed percentage. Well, staff's actually moving forward with a recommendation that's a little bit of a hybrid of the original dynamic recommendation. And so we're recommending a dynamic TDA-only formula. So this would be a formula that would be very similar to the way we break up SMART's STA formula funds, but it would be for a Golden Gate to have a performance-based formula based on revenue and, not revenue, based on passenger miles and service hours, right? So those revenue hours of service and the amount of the number of passengers they serve as a 50-50 split, okay? And that number can go up and down based on the level of service that Golden Gate provides within our county. We applied this 50% revenue hours, 50% passenger formula to the funds that were available in fiscal year 25, but we used it using the numbers from fiscal year 19, fiscal year 22, and fiscal year 24 to look at what those impacts are. We do believe that historically, back from, going back to 1996, that in general, this formula would be somewhat representative of that 10% set aside that Golden Gate has had. There was a drop in Golden Gate transit service in Sonoma County prior to COVID, and then a significant drop once the pandemic hit. So this recommendation would actually reduce Golden Gate's current share of the 7.4 million. It would be reduced by 3.4 million to approximately 4 million total. If staff's recommendation was to be approved, or that would be what the recommendation to MTC would be. It would still cap Golden Gate's total amount at 25%. So if they were to return to historic service levels, you would have historic funding levels be returned as well with this dynamic recommendation. To just recap the September 3rd transit ad hoc, we did have a strong preference for a dynamic formula and a very strong preference to have the mascots plan that's being implemented to establish that long-term solution. Our mascots plan will not be available until spring of next year, which at that point, it will be too late to ask MTC to act to actually impact the fiscal year 26 coordinated claim. We will need action, this year, ideally this month, to be able to ask MTC to make a change. Otherwise, I don't believe that the timing is such that MTC would even have an opportunity to agendize it and make the changes necessary. Looking at committee feedback. So the overwhelming committee feedback from all of our committees that we took to it. So this is the Transit Paratransit, the Transit Technical Advisory Committee, our Citizens Advisory Committee that met as a committee of the whole. We did not have a quorum at the CAC, as well as our those three primary committees. And we wanted some action now as opposed to waiting, right? So we've had 5 years of coordinated claims since the pandemic impacts. This would be the 6th year, and they're looking for some reduction in Golden Gate Transit's portion. The current dynamic TDA only formula that's recommended within the staff report did receive some criticism from the Transit Technical Advisory Committee, which actually met just last week. And I want to make clear what those are on these bullets here. First off, that they felt that the cut was too big for an uncertain amount of time. So they felt that 3.4 million was just too much for Golden Gate to have at one time. They also were making comments that if they were to receive those funds, they would most likely have to go to capital, not operating, because they would not be on a longer time, not be able to plan to spend operations, right? So when you change your operations, you need to have that sustainable funding source to be able to maintain those operations. There was a request to include policies on how the funding will be spent. This is to ensure that the mascots recommendations can be implemented. We can include those policies in the coordinated claim as we move forward, independent of funding recommendations, and this board can have more discussions on that as we move forward with our coordinated claim in fiscal year 26. Also, it was very clear, and this is something we all agree on. More time is needed for a better long-term solution. So when we talk about a better long-term solution, some of the things that keep coming up that we are continuing to work on is that there's this preference that some of the operators voice that they would like just the 25% to become 19% and have multi-year certainty over that. There's also discussion of considering other metrics, especially the metric of passenger miles. Passenger miles really favors the regional operators, which makes sure that it's how much people you move for what distance, not just the number of total people moved. The last is that fixed subsidy, right? So what is the right level of subsidy for Golden Gate Transit? Historically, when the subsidy for Golden Gate, when the original agreement went into effect back in 1996, was about 30% of service in Sonoma County was paid for out of TDA funds. The remainder was supplemented by other Golden Gate fund sources. We're working with Golden Gate to establish what that current subsidy is, which is we're not in agreement on that exact calculation as to where we're at. So we're working towards that now. With that being said, so staff's asking for, a board recommendation today. And then, we would make the request for possible MTC and regional transit operator board actions that would happen in the winter of 2025. And then RCPA or SCTA RCPA will approve the fiscal year 26 coordinated claim in April of 25. Lastly, I do want to really bold up that part where the mascots efforts will continue, right? So they are there. We have the mascots committee, the general managers, we have the mascots finance subcommittees. That's all the CFOs of these entities or the general manager acting as a CFO. And then we even have this extra breakout group where we have the analysts and kind of like the data wonks really working on what type of formulas can really work for everybody. Their next meeting of this breakout group, I can tell you, is on October 30th. All of that's going to continue regardless of any action today by this board. With that, so action is needed now if we do want to impact the fiscal year 26 coordinated claim, and staff requests the board approve the staff recommendation on this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Coming back to my colleagues. Actually, well, let's just go ahead and take any comments from members of the public in person. Seeing none, Drew, is there anyone online who wishes to speak on this item?
I currently do not see any members online wishing to speak on this item, and I also did not receive any pre-submitted public comment on this item as well.
Thank you very much. Now bringing it back to my colleagues, Director Harvey and then Director Rabbit.
I just have a question. Does anyone know why there's such a significant difference in the cost per revenue hour? I mean, 4 times is a little bit much. Does anybody know what drives Golden Gate to be 4 times more expensive than the other operators?
So, I mean, we have 2 Golden Gate directors here, but let me say what's stated in the TDA audit and what I've heard from Golden Gate's general manager direct, right? So one is that they've had a drop in service and their costs continue to increase. So just because there's a drop in increase, they have not had a reduce in service. And they are the response from the general manager is that they are working, to decrease those costs, and they do believe that there is a long-term projection that will reduce it back down closer to that $400 number. But he did not have that. That's where the conversation ended.
But didn't you just say in your previous comments that it went up from 500 something to 600? So that doesn't match.
Agreed. And this is one of the action items of that breakout group that I described to explain why does the fiscal year 23 TDA audit state a 600 and change cost per revenue hour versus the report that we're getting from them is stating that it's 400 and change. So there's these discrepancies that we're working through with them. Yeah. So I apologize. I do not have a better explanation for the cost.
Excellent question. Director Rabbit?
Just on that, let me say as the finance chair of the Golden Gate Bridge, I can tell you that that $1,200 figure is a little misleading, to be honest, although it's true that the Golden Gate Bridge is a very strong labor union shop that adds costs. Regional transit is typically more expensive than local transit. That adds costs. Longer routes, as was mentioned by James, also adds costs as well. And I will say there's one other nuance, and I don't know if any other transit agency, I see Brian here, is in that same boat. But, with the federal assistance that we got from the pandemic that we're still actually expending, and I think this through this next fiscal year, because we've cut costs so much across the board, that federal part of the criteria for that federal assistance is that you don't have any layoffs. That you keep the staff that you have, so you're running the same, service, and that was part of the requirement that we all had as we took those, whether it was ARPA or Chrissy or the other funding sources that were out there. I think we have about, what, 45 million left to expend in this fiscal year. And if we didn't have that, we'd have cuts across the board, and those prices would look much different. I can tell you, I mean, if, and just in terms of costs, I mean, because you have some non-union shops that are contracted that are very different than what Golden Gate does, or even Smart, which is also, what, $1,200 an hour. So, you know, everything is subsidized to a certain degree on those particular pieces. But let me just say, I did miss our September meeting and I had a scheduling conflict, which I regret. And I wrote some notes because I have strong feelings about this because I'm involved in so many different entities and deal with this stuff probably a couple of different times each and every week. I do wear a lot of hats here at SCTA, Sonoma County Transit, Commissioner at MTC, longtime director, as I said, of the Golden Gate Bridge. In addition, I've been serving on the Transit Select Committee, trying to solve the transit fiscal cliff throughout the Bay Area. And at MTC, I chair the Regional Network Management Committee, which ironically, of which today's discussion would be in our purview. So given my experience in those conversations, I really do encourage this body to wait until after the mascot study is complete. And as you all know, hopefully you all know, the mascot study is looking at how all agencies who serve the 101 corridor can coordinate and serve customers better. It was at least partially funded through MTC, if not fully. And through the committee I chair, I can tell you, I do not believe that MTC will take up this issue until the mascot study is completed, which because of scheduling, may miss this next fiscal year. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the way the timing works. And I do think that having a plan to implement that you can actually put dollars to is the most important thing going forward, rather than just slash one budget and put it into other pots. Let's figure out what the plan is so that we could move forward with those dollars. And again, if you read the attached resolution, any effort to change allocations must be a joint effort through the Sonoma County and Golden Gate. And while MTC reserves the right to amend unilaterally, again, in my opinion, I don't think they will. And I will say, I don't think they should. Again, because we put 10% of $1 billion towards transit transformation, which is the coordination of transit, the 27 transit agencies across the Bay Area. I don't think they're going to jumpstart that by not waiting for the mascots study to be completed. We're fortunate that we've been ahead of the curve in this county, and I give James great credit and Suzanne before for taking the lead on that, and Brian and Kate's here as well. So everyone who's been part of that, I give them great credit. We are ahead of the curve in that, but we're not complete yet. So again, I don't think that will come up. So again, given this experience, I think that we should wait until it's served or until it's complete, so we know what we're actually paying for. The agreement is for inter-county transit service, and there are now 2 providers who do so, Smart and Golden Gate, but there's only one that serves 3 counties, and that's Golden Gate. So like it or not, we do live in a region that is reasonably well served, at least by California standards, by inter-county or regional transit. And I will say, you know, a reduction may be in order. Things are different post-COVID than they were pre-COVID. But we should know first what those impacts to Sonoma County residents, and if we are at risk of losing bus connections to Marin and San Francisco. Mascots is charged with that analysis. We need to be patient and wait for the coordination work to be completed and then implement the recommendations. And as James said, it's a zero-sum game. All transit operators need surety in finances. None of the transit agencies who serve Sonoma County could take a $3.4 million hit all at once. And further, a 2-step process or an interim step does not provide that surety and surely would only result in significant service cuts. So again, more time is needed, as James said also. So I would really encourage this body to wait until the Mascots 101 corridor study is complete, because then we'll have a better picture of who should be providing what service, where, when, and how. Thank you.
Any other comments from my colleagues? Director Corsi?
Just a couple of questions for staff. James, the tables you have in the staff report. They indicate that the Golden Gate share of TDA has dropped pretty consistently for the last 5 or 6 years, 6 years. Has their service dropped as well in Sonoma County?
Yeah, so Golden Gate service has dropped substantially in Sonoma County, especially since the pandemic, but there was a decline even prior to then. The numbers that you're looking at in the staff report, though, I believe refer to they refer to the dynamic nature of what the proposed formula would be and what it would look like with a back cast, right? So you're essentially saying, hey, let's look back at what that level of service has been based on passengers and revenue hours. And so you can see that in 2019, it would be a fairly small cut of less than $1 million, whereas in 2024, that's where the cut goes up to the $3.4 million. So yes, the revenue hours and the passengers have been substantially reduced.
Can you confirm, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm following through the chair. We're continuing to pay a flat 25% year over year in dollars, even though they have substantially decreased service prior to and after the pandemic. The dollars we pay them have not changed.
So yes, that is correct.
Thanks, Director Kelly. That's a better way of asking the question. James, can you help me a little bit? You've put a number of alternatives in front of us, and I'm not exactly sure which one is your recommendation.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So within the staff report, there's a table at the top that shows Golden Gate revenue hours of about 52,000 and local bus revenue hours of about 238,000. That is, and then the respective total passengers that they carry for that fiscal year data as well. That is the recommendation. And so the recommendation is to essentially apply whatever these numbers. So it'd be because this is the best data that we're going to have, fiscal year 24 data, and apply this split, right, which is essentially reduces them down to 13.28%. So they would go from 25% to 13.28%. And we're not going to get any more better data than this before our coordinated claim goes into effect in fiscal year 26.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? And Director Kelly, I can't see you on the screen. So I don't know if you have your hand raised or if you have anything else to follow up on from that.
Thank you so much. Yes, I do have my hand raised and I will just go ahead and lower it. Apologies. I wanted to just, share, I appreciate staff bringing this forward. And I know that this has been, a long process that you've all been endeavoring to try to bring this forward and have conversations around how do we equitably distribute these funds amongst all of the operators that are providing service in our region. And I'm so glad we're finally going to do that study and get this data back from the mascot study, and just want to commend our colleagues who are on Golden Gate Transit and MTC to try to get us the reliable information so that we can make an informed decision going forward. And I think just knowing how much the service has dropped off in recent years and how much it had dropped off before that for Sonoma County, and the fact that we've continued to pay that flat 25% of our TDA funds from the county, I feel like we're long overdue to look at this 1996 agreement. And while I know we'll have more information going forward, I would like to see us follow staff's recommendation for that dynamic formula alternative that was presented, so that at least for the fiscal year, if you know, I know Golden Gate Transit hasn't agreed to this, and I know that they haven't agreed to put forward any potential change at this time. And so it's my hope that at least even if MTC doesn't want to take this forward, that at least Sonoma County is on record saying that we do want to see a change to this formula, and that we feel like we're, you know, overpaying for the service that we're receiving. And I think by advancing this today would at least be able to send a message from our communities that we're paying into a fund that we're not getting our fair share of, you know, with service. So my recommendation would be that we move forward with what the staff recommendation is today.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Is that a recommendation, or it sounded suspiciously like a motion?
I move that we adopt staff's recommendation for that alternative for the dynamic TDA formula.
Thank you. Do we have a second for that?
I'd be happy to second that. I just have a short comment in that, you know, I too sit on this board and the SMART board, and I've enjoyed the incredible service that Golden Gate Transit provides, both their bus service and their ferry service. I relied on it, and they're incredibly, I mean, they're just an essential part of our transportation system in the Bay Area. We all of our agencies rely on each other to provide service. But when I look at, you know, 25% of this money going just right out the door, and I have to look the folks in the eye at my senior center who have incredibly long headways if they want to use Sonoma County Transit. We are, you know, most of our meeting today was talking about, you know, revolutionary change in our built environment. We talk all the time about providing last mile service. And we're talking about, you know, a service that we absolutely have relied on and continue to rely on, but it's an agreement from 1996. There's just absolutely no excuse for that not having been revisited. And even if we do need the cooperation of those partner agencies in order to be heard, I think it's important that Sonoma County goes on record, as Director Kelly indicated, that yes, we recognize how important the mascot service is, and we recognize the fact that MTC, in fact, funded that service so that all of us in the Bay Area can provide better service to our riders. We need a fundamental change because climate change is here. We have people who are pedestrians and bicyclists who are at risks on our roads because people are driving too fast and there aren't safe alternatives. We need change now, not yesterday. So even if it does fall on deaf ears initially, I personally want to go on record as to say that we respectfully need to see a change in how this funding mechanism is designed. So I'm going to second that motion.
Appreciate that, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of the importance of Golden Gate Transit, and also want to thank my colleagues for their service on the district. Are there any final remarks before we go to a vote? All right.
Chair Hopkins, I do want to interrupt. My apologies for interrupting. I do see a member of the public who wishes to speak on this item now. I know we did open public comment already, but I wanted to let you know that there is now a member who wishes to speak.
Okay, we did already take public comment, but I will allow this member to speak. Can we limit it to 2 minutes, please? Because we have someone who's trying to get out of here and I think would like to take the vote before she leaves.
Most certainly. All right, so we have Rick Lutman wishing to speak. Rick, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for this exception. I didn't get my hand up in time before. I'm a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee, and I sit there as a representative of the League of Women Voters. As James mentioned, we had a meeting early this month, but we didn't have a quorum, so we couldn't take any official action. But it was clearly the strong sentiment of committee members to support this recommendation from the staff. I remember about a year ago or so, I found out how much money we're paying, that is Sonoma County, are paying Golden Gate for service that has deteriorated significantly. And it's all based on an agreement that goes back nearly 3 decades. So while it's important to do this mascot study and we can make permanent decisions when that's in, we think it's important to take some action now. We, as Sonoma County residents, are just paying way too much for the significantly less amount of service that we're getting. So these are some of the reasons that we, as individual members of the committee, spoke in favor of the staff recommendation that you're considering now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Rick. Director Giudice?
Thank you. I appreciate the good work of the mascots group, and I understand that there is an inequity here and there will have to be an adjustment. I totally understand that. Having said that, I don't think this is the appropriate time, and I'll be voting no on this item. I think I'm in the minority, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And I appreciate the cordiality in which of your comments, of all your comments in terms of our service on the Bridge District. And it is conflicting for both David and I. First I wear my Rona Park hat, then I wear my SCTA hat and my GGB hat, and regional transportation is important. And I'm hoping when we get through the end of this mascot study that somehow SMART is at the table, because I think that's going to be really important as we talk about, the transformation of getting folks with last mile delivery to the 101 corridor and then getting up and down safely on the SMART line. And I think GGB has a big part to play there, especially in San Rafael and other areas as well. But I just wanted to say that, but I'll be voting no on the item.
All right. Director Hinton.
Yeah, I have a closed session that I need to get to, but I really want to make this vote and I want to make this comment. I'm sitting here to represent Sebastopol and my citizens. And in fact, during the meeting, I sent some emails to my planner about some of the grant opportunities that we probably can't even apply for because we're not on the line. So just from Sebastopol, I have to be the strongest advocate for the people that elected me, and that's why I'm here. So I'm going to be voting along with, I believe, a number of people that have the same concerns I do that are not in the big cities in the center of Sonoma County. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. And with that, seeing no more comments, Drew, would you mind leading us in a roll call vote on this item? We do have a motion and a second on the floor.
All right, so on the motion from Director Kelly, we'll start with Director Cater Thompson.
Yes.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
No.
Director Hinton,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Okepke,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
No.
Vice Chair Bagby,
Aye.
and Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And we see that motion passing.
Thank you very much, Drew. And with that, we are going to move on to 5.5, which is our final budgets. And we're going to try to wrap this up because I know that we need a minimum of 8 to vote to move these forward. So we'll try to do lightning speed on 551 through 555, if that's okay.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you.
Chair Hopkins and directors. As you know, by October of each year, the SCTA RCPA must adopt 5 final budgets for operations to continue. The 5 budgets cover the RCPA, the Transportation Fund for Clean Air, or TFCA program, Measure M, Go Sonoma, and the SCTA General Operations. Staff will present the 5 budgets all together, and then we'll turn it back to the board for any questions and discussion. So starting out with the RCPA budget, staff are all employees at the SCTA. And over 3/4 of our revenue and a half of our funded positions are BayRen. And as you know, we're continuing to work on securing additional sources of funding for our climate work. So in terms of, oh, sorry, I was on the wrong slide. There we go. So in terms of our revenue changes in FY 24-25, we are budgeting an increase in local contributions based on the CPI, a 2.62% increase in CPI.
As I mentioned, the majority of our funding is from Bayren, and about 330K of the increase in revenue is for expansion of Bayren programs in the new fiscal year. In terms of expenditures, we are budgeting a 53K increase for RCPA share of the legislative and strategic visioning consultants, and then about 330K total for the Bayren program expansion, which includes the new Bayren liaison service as well as water upgrade save program expansion. In terms of changes from the preliminary budget, which we presented to you back in May, the one major change is that we are budgeting a carryover of funds from the prior fiscal year for Bayren programs, and this is due to delays in program implementation. And so with that, the staff recommendation is to adopt the FY 24-25 RCPA final budget, and I'll turn it over to David to go through the TFCA, Measure M, and Go Sonoma budgets.
Thank you, Tanya. Good evening, Madam Chair and Directors. So this is the TFCA final budget for fiscal 24-25. As you may know, the TFCA program is the Transportation Fund for Clean Air and is distributed by formula to SCTA and the other county transportation authorities. We administered the TFCA 40% program. The funds are distributed by formula to the transit operators and through a competitive process. We will be revisiting that distribution process for the program next fiscal year, and 6.25% of the funds are distributed to SCTA to administer the program. There are essentially no substantial changes from the preliminary budget that you approved back in May. These are just the slides that were presented before. There are only $600 in differences compared from the preliminary budget to the final budget. That's due to legal costs from county council. And with that, we would recommend that you approve the final TFCA budget for fiscal 24-25. Just in the interest of time, I'll go on to the Measure M and Go Sonoma budgets now. So this is the Measure M final budget for fiscal year 24-25. It is to implement the voter approved 2004 sales tax for Measure M that will expire on March 31st, 2025. Following the expiration of Measure M, Go Sonoma revenue collections will start. So this budget is focused around those 3 quarters of Measure M that will be collected this fiscal year. We had some decreases in sales tax for 2024 compared to 2023. This is really due to decreased expenditures in the heavy industrial and ag supply sectors, declines in new auto sales, and also consumers are putting off major house remodel projects as they're really tightening their belts and they're spending more at discount stores rather than on retail stores. There are some bright spots. There are some increased spending at restaurants, at kind of the quick serve, fast casual restaurants, and also gas prices have stayed relatively stable. So there's some small growth increases in certain sectors. Looking at our sales tax projections going forward, back in May, we had projected a growth rate of 1.5% for this fiscal year. Unfortunately, with the economic factors at play, we're now looking at a negative 0.1% growth rate. So relatively flat compared to last fiscal year where we had actual revenue of 31.6 million. Following in next fiscal year, fiscal 25-26, we estimate going back to 2.5% growth and then returning to 2.9% growth in fiscal 26-27. So we're getting back to normal. However, we're still having a little bit of a bump in the road. As I mentioned earlier, we're only having 3 quarters of revenue collection for Measure M. That's why revenue is down about 25% as we shift to Go Sonoma next at the end of the fiscal year. Here's the Measure M expenditure plan. We have the categories for Highway 101, local streets projects, local street rehabilitation, admin, the bicycle and pedestrian program, rail and transit. So these have not changed from the original expenditure plan back in 2004. Looking at the changes in the new budget for fiscal 24-25, as mentioned earlier, we have flat sales tax growth compared to 23-24. There is an increase in pass-through revenue from regional Measure 3 as we're delivering some Highway 101 projects using RM3 funds and then passing them through the Measure M budget. And there's a small decrease in pass-through funds as well from the federal state hospital funds that we use in the budget. So it's about a 24% decrease in revenue overall, including the pass-through funds. On the expenditure side, we have an 11.3 million decrease in contributions to other governments as other projects such as Fulton Road and Mark West Springs Road get wrapped up. And we have continued expenditures on local streets projects with delivery of the Hearn Avenue interchange in Santa Rosa. So overall expenditures are down 27% compared to last fiscal year. As I mentioned earlier, we have a decrease from the preliminary budget. We have a 1.5% lower sales tax growth rate than we had thought we were going to have back then. And we also had adjustments in the final budget with expenses based on the actuals for fiscal year 23-24 and resulting increase in carryover amount. With that, we recommend that you approve the final 24-25 Measure M budget, and I'll move on to the related Go Sonoma budget. So this is the first budget for Go Sonoma, as revenue will start collecting on April 1st, 2025. The board back in May approved a number of loans from Measure M to Go Sonoma to jumpstart a number of projects and program, and I'll be going to that further. These are the similar sales tax growth rates you saw for Measure M. As I mentioned earlier, there's only 1 quarter of revenue for Go Sonoma, and so we have about 7.9 million in revenue anticipated. We do not know the timing of that revenue, and probably be collected in May and June and transferred to us from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. So we're not budgeting any of that revenue, and we distribute next fiscal year. We're only using loan proceeds from Measure M to Go Sonoma for any projects and programs this fiscal year. Here are the Go Sonoma programs. We have 4 programs and 8 different budgets. The 4 programs are the Go Sonoma Roads program, the Build Bikeways and Pathways, Go Sonoma Transit, and Move Traffic Improve Safety. And there are a number of sub-programs under those that make up the 8 budgets in the Go Sonoma budget. As mentioned earlier, revenue is flat compared to fiscal year 23-24, and the timing of the first payment of Go Sonoma funds from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration is uncertain. That's why the board back in May approved a loan. This budget includes a $3.8 million loan from Measure M to Go Sonoma for this fiscal year, and it's reflected in the budget as advances in and advances out clearing. So it never actually touches the budget. It just comes in and goes away as we're going to be making those repayments back over time. Expenditures, just to highlight, we have 1.8 million in contributions to other governments for projects, 860,000 for consultant services for community programs, Safe Route School program, and capacity building, and $415,000 for SCTA staff time to administer these programs. So we have a total of 3.08 million expenditures. Changes from the budget, as mentioned earlier, we have the decrease in sales tax growth rate. As mentioned on the previous item, we also have 400,000 additional expenditures for both bike and pathway projects. This was an adjustment the board just approved today on the consent calendar for the city Cotati's closing sidewalk gap project that allowed that project to be fully delivered in fiscal year 24-25. And that was the one major adjustment on this budget. With that, we recommend that you adopt the final fiscal year 24-25 Go Sonoma budget. I'll turn it over to James for the STA budget.
All right, our department analyst Brenton Hare's out sick today, so I'm going to pinch hit for him on the SCTA budget. We are in manageable financial shape. I will say that all of the 16 staff for the SCTA RCPA that manage the sales tax measures, the TFCA, as well as the RCPA and SCTA activities all are part of the SCTA budget. And this is the organizational chart representing those 16 full-time staff members. Changes in the budget since the fiscal year 25 included the introduction of Go Sonoma's rollout with the inclusion of those loans from Measure M to implement Go Sonoma in fiscal year 25 earlier than the revenue starts. It also included some decrease or some revenues decreasing on State Route 37 as we move towards construction on the first initial phase there. Federal contract revenue increased due to the 2023 Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, as well as the environmental document that we're working on for State Route 121 at 8th Street East. Lastly, we saw a decrease in the Great Mitigation funding as we transition to the new county agreement that was signed in 2023. Changes to the expenditures for fiscal year 24-25 tend to mirror those same revenue changes where we had, contributions to other governments decrease due to the Great Mitigation funds, which are funds that went to Caltrans for the capital construction within Petaluma for the 101 carpool lane, and then the increases to services, consultant services due to that Safe Streets and Roads for All and the State Route 121 at 8th Street East. So that is implementation of the 2023 Safe Streets and Roads for All, not to be confused with what Margot was talking about earlier, which is our hopes of being awarded 2024 Safe Streets and Roads for All funding as well. Changes from the SCTA preliminary budget, both revenue and expenditures due to some carryover funds from the Great Mitigation, as well as increase in consultant costs to implement the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And with that, I will just ask that staff recommends approving all 5 of the budgets: RCPA, TFCA, Measure M, Go Sonoma, and SCTA, as well as approval of the SCTA local contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first, I will ask if there are any members of the public in person who wish to comment on this item. Seeing none. Drew, is there anyone online who wishes to remark on this item?
Nope, no hands are raised on this item, Chair Hopkins.
Great. And nothing received ahead of time?
Oh, right, and nothing was received ahead of time either.
Perfect. Thank you. I will bring it back to my colleagues for any questions or comments on this one. Director Corsi made a motion. Director Okrepke has the second. So Drew, if we could go ahead and take a roll call vote, that would be great.
All righty. Did I got the right button? Okay. Director Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Director Corsi? Yes. Director Harvey?
Yes.
Director Giudice?
Yes.
Director Hinton has left. Director Kelly has also left. Director Okrepke? Director Rabbit?
Aye.
Vice Chair Bagby?
Aye.
And Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And we see that motion passing.
Just made it. Good job, everybody. Thank you for all being here. Appreciate it.
This nail biter.
Mhm. All right. And with that, we are going to go ahead and move on to reports and announcements. So I'll hand it over to James to start with the executive committee report.
Great. So executive committee today, we briefly touched on some of our October agenda we just discussed, as well as looking ahead to our November agenda. Looking forward to that legislative update that we discussed in November, as well as discussing our SCTA funding plan cycle 2 overview. We also touched on the executive director's review process, which interviews have been scheduled with the consultant and with both the board members, as well as a 360 review of my peers and SCTA RCPA managers, with a December date for that review to be conducted. And that concludes my report on the executive committee.
Great. And that brings us to regional agency reports. Does anyone have anything to share from any of our regional agencies? One thing that I can share from Sonoma Clean Power is that the governor did sign our bill about the GeoZone, which was very exciting. And I believe that SCTA submitted a letter in support. Yeah, so thank you for that. And anyone else have anything to mention? Director Rabbit and then Director Okrepke.
Yeah, real briefly, MTC did approve or did include Healdsburg in the transportation plan, removed railroad avenue improvements and farmers lane improvements, because as you know, that's a zero-sum game as well. It's a fiscally constrained plan. So in order to add the Healdsburg smart connection to Healdsburg in there, 2 things had to come out. We continue to, and I believe it will happen, getting Cloverdale in the plan as well. It will also mean the equivalent dollar amount from Sonoma County will have to come out. And then at Golden Gate Bridge, we did approve, I think, an $860 million seismic safety upgrade. $400 million of that, thanks to Nancy Pelosi as parting gift with the large bridge program. $200 million of that from the state, which we are very grateful for, especially given the economic climate at the state. I think it's $50 million over 4 years. And then $260 million, notably, out of the bridge district reserves. And I say this because I also had a meeting regarding the Bay Area Toll Authority, which manages the 7 state bridges in the Bay Area, which does not have a district or a reserve. And so look for, and I mentioned in executive committee, RM2 and RM3 was passed. And even though it only this year was 8% of the total budget. Those two regional measures allocated dollars at a projection of higher bridge tolls, which have not occurred, obviously, with the pandemic. So like at Golden Gate, they're upside down, and there'll be a long way of saying that look for bridge tolls to be raised over the next so many years on the 7 state bridges. That's it for me.
Director Krupke?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was able to spend 2 days, 48 hours in Washington, D.C. last year at the Department of Transportation for a Thriving Communities convening, which was very interesting. Get together of about 50 different communities across the United States talking about their transportation needs and issues and the greater issues that they face because of it. Was able to get able to see a speech by Secretary Buttigieg. I would venture to guess that there are no secretaries of transportation as well spoken as he is. It was a pretty incredible experience learning about various opportunities that exist out there, like for funding like RIF and TIFIA and all these things that we didn't know really existed, and kind of came back bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about what we can do in the city of Santa Rosa. But I would say that as we sit here and discuss our transportation issues and some of the things we're facing, talking to city council members from 10,000 person rural Alabama and West Memphis, Arkansas, I would say that our transportation issues are what you could call first world transportation issues. So always keep that in mind when we discuss it. We're very lucky to have the issues that we have. But it was a great opportunity.
Great. Anything else from anybody? All right, seeing none, we do have the advisory committee agendas as part of the packet, and then moving on to our SCTA, RCPA activities reports. And I believe Ross is up first with marketing and communications. I feel like it's a game of last man standing with so many staff members out sick and otherwise.
Good afternoon, directors. I will keep this brief. As we've been talking about, comprehensive transportation plan engagement has begun. The main things I want to highlight is we have surveys out on the homepage of our website. Those are listed. Also got a page just for that. And most importantly, we have a virtual town hall on October 22nd. It's up on the socials and everything right now. Work continued over the previous month on the SR 37 corridor comms plan. We had a charrette at Solano Transportation. That's getting close, hoping to have a draft comms plan by the end of the year. And then we're kind of holding this. I don't want to steal Dana's thunder, but very slowly we are rolling out the Redwood Bike Share is starting to happen, kind of a soft launch. So there is some functionality as of right now, but I wanted to say on, I believe that is November 6th. Yeah, November 6th, we will be having a ribbon cutting event at the Petaluma Smart Station. Again, they're kind of holding off on pushing out the information just until everything's functional. You'll be hearing about that very soon. And I believe, yeah, that's it for now. I'll keep it brief. Thank you very much. And let me know if you have any questions on any of these items.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, now we will go over to BC for an update on climate activities.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair Hopkins and members of the board. My name is BC Caps, Climate Programs Manager here with RCPA. Just wanted to highlight 3 items of our activities from the last month. And I do not believe this was ever announced last month, but our offices, our combined offices here, have been certified through the California Green Business Certification Program. So that's a huge accomplishment for our team here. That effort in-house was led by Tanya and by Drew with support from a number of other staff members. And that program is actually implemented here in the county, throughout the county, by the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division. So we've been working very closely with CARD for the last few months, and we now are officially a California Green Business. And one of our last steps internally that we're doing is forming an internal green team to discuss additional improvements and to plan some staff development training. So that's something we've been working on. Is very glad to see that come to completion in the last few weeks. Second, a brief update on our Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan. That is a new report that I've been working on personally. We gave presentations about that plan to our members and partners, to all of the jurisdictional staff across all of the counties, or all the cities in the county, as well as gave a presentation to our Climate Action Advisory Committee last Friday. Got great feedback from both of those bodies. I also hosted a kickoff meeting with a staff advisory group, which was representatives from, I believe, 7 or 8 of the jurisdictions throughout the county. We had a very detailed and in-depth conversation to give guidance on the development of that report. And that is a report that we'll be working on through the end of the year and looking to present back to you, to this body, sometime early in spring 2025. And finally, the last thing I wanted to highlight was our countywide coordination on the Bay Area Regional Energy Network programs. A couple of quick highlights there. We recently met with the City of Petaluma's new Climate Action Coordinator to discuss implementation of the newly developed Blueprint for Climate Action, which the city has been developing, and looking to work with them to learn more about the city's needs and the available programs that we can plug in and assist with there as they implement the program. In a very similar vein, we have been meeting with City of Sebastopol staff to review their climate action framework and to identify available resources and to assist with them determining kind of implementation priorities given a very limited budget. And the last thing I wanted to mention is we've been working with David Liebman at the Santa Rosa Junior College and are going to host working with him to host a tour of their JC campus microgrid. So that's going to be on Monday, October 28th at the JC campus. That invitation has been passed along to a number of our jurisdictional staff and our agency partners, but I wanted to pass along that invitation directly to this board and these board members, you board members, in case anybody would like to join us on the morning of the 28th at the junior college to get a tour of what they have been working on the last couple of years. So with that, that concludes my report for today, and thank you.
Great. And I just had a request from the vice chair. If we get that information emailed out, that would be great.
Absolutely. On the microgrid tour?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Director Corsi.
Yes. I'll say that is an internal staff project to fit with the holidays, to fit with the season. So very good.
Anything else from my colleagues? Seeing none, then I believe that we are over to Chris for planning activities.
Thank you, Chair Hopkins and members of the board. So I'll just touch on a few of the more time-sensitive items in the planning activities report for this month, since we're short on time. First, Ross mentioned it. We have actual bikes out in the field right now in Petaluma and Cotati, also to our neighbors in the south in San Rafael and Larkspur. And we're looking to have bikes out in Roanoke Park next, and working on final approvals for Santa Rosa Novato and Sonoma State and Sonoma County Junior College. So working on getting those bikes out, you'll start seeing those around. So very excited about that. Moving on to the countywide active transportation plan, public draft active transportation plans for Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Roanoke Park, Sebastopol, and Sonoma are all published online and open for public review and comment through November 30th. And we're expecting to get the draft plans for Sonoma County and the countywide plan up soon. So we'll have an item on the active transportation plans to you in November. So that's coming up soon. Moving on to the CTP, Ross mentioned our virtual town hall, so we're very excited about that. We're also working with your local staff to update project information for existing projects and programs in our previous that are included in our adopted plan. We're going to open up applications for new CTP projects later this month, and those will be due in December. So we're hoping to compile all that and bring a draft CTP project and program list to you sometime early next year. And then finally touching on the transit-oriented communities policy, Luke mentioned the grant grant funds that are going to be available this fall. There's 20 million for policy work, about 40 million for capital projects. So we've been talking to the Technical Advisory Committee and the Planning Advisory about that for a few months, and we'll have ABAG and MTC staff out at the PAC this week to talk more about that. So your staff are in the loop on that, and hopefully we can bring some of those funds home to help out with implementation of that policy. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap things up and happy to answer any questions on the planning activities report.
Great. Any questions? Director Corsi?
Redwood Bike Share.
There we go.
I downloaded it this morning. It's real easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good one.
Bikeshare.org, right? Is the,
If you're in the App Store, just type Redwood
Oh,
Bike
okay.
Share and it'll just come right out.
Great. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. And then it will be Shauna with projects and programming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, directors. In the interest of time, I'll just stick to 3 projects to highlight for the projects and programming report. First off, the 116-121 interchange project continues to progress for construction. After last month's meeting, we did meet with Caltrans to try to address the congestion that is being caused by this stage of the construction. Caltrans and the contractor agreed to add some changeable message signs to alert the driving public of the construction activities happening. And we anticipate that there will be a change to the next stage probably by the end of the month. So we are expecting that congestion to be relieved somewhat. We are also talking with the contractor about some other options for continuing work through the winter months, but that hasn't been solidified yet. For the Hearn Avenue interchange project, that project also continues to progress through construction, and test piles have begun being driven, and they anticipate that they will be driving piles through the end of this month. And they expect, and they are working, the contractor and Caltrans and SCTA are all working together to try to make sure that that information is provided to the public, both the surrounding businesses and residents and the driving public at large. And then finally, just to let you know that SCTA held a second public meeting for the Fulton Highway 12 intersection improvements feasibility study. And that was held on October 2nd to summarize the previous input that we had already received on that project on short, medium, and long-term options for the feasibility study area, and to collect further feedback. And the meeting was held virtually and provided in an alternative language channel in real time. And the meeting presentation, the video recording, the Spanish translation, and all of the project concept designs are available on the SCTA website. With that, I would hand it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, thank you so much for all of the information. Are there any members of the public in person who wish to comment or have questions about any of the material we just received? Seeing none, Drew, is there anyone online?
I am not seeing any members online wishing to speak on these items, Chair Hopkins.
All right, and that brings us back to any board member announcements before we adjourn the meeting. Director Giudice.
Yeah, this is probably going to be one of many, and we witnessed one last week, but I just want to thank Vice Chair Melanie Bagby for her service on SCTA. Starting out as a new person elected, the learning curve jumping onto SCTA is pretty steep. And you've really helped me to understand everything, and I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed our conversation. So I don't know if you'll be at the next meeting, so I thought I would at least.
You should be, right?
You think we'll be? Okay, good.
Yeah.
But
They haven't certified.
it won't be certified, okay.
Yep. All right. Well, seeing no other comments, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.